Chapter 3108. The ancient Phoenix Mountain had completely collapsed under the fierce battle, turning into ruins. It was a ghastly sight to behold. On the ruins, Chunzong and the ancient Phoenix old ancestor, who had transformed into a human form, faced each other. The fierce battle had already ended. Facing Chunzong's inquiry, the ancient Phoenix old ancestor did not respond for a while. In his indifferent eyes, there seemed to be a little more consideration. After a long time, the ancient Phoenix old ancestor opened his mouth, but he did not respond to Chunzong. Instead, he looked into the distance. "Come over here." The ancient Phoenix old ancestor spoke in the direction where Yunyinshin was. Yunyinshin paused for a moment and looked at Chunzong first. Chunzong shook his head slightly. Who knew why the ancient Phoenix old ancestor had called Yunyinshin over? What if he wanted to capture Yunyinshin to threaten him? Chunzong was not clear about the ancient Phoenix old ancestor's temperament, and so on. In just a short contact, he did not dare to say that he had seen through him. Moreover, they had just fought a fierce battle, and it was a merciless battle. Although they had stopped now, who could be sure that the ancient Phoenix old ancestor would not take the opportunity to attack again? Any threat must be eliminated as much as possible. This scene was also seen by the ancient Phoenix old ancestor, and his eyes returned to indifference. If you want to recover your memory, there's only one way. On the ancient Phoenix old ancestor's indifferent face, there was a trace of a mocking smile. Her bloodline is inherited from me. As long as that bloodline is abolished, the side effects will be eliminated and the memory seal will also be lifted. This voice was not concealed in the slightest. Not only did Chunzong hear it, but the others in the distance also heard it clearly. Abolish the bloodline. The ancient profound world was a world where bloodlines were the most important. Although there were some powerhouses who did not rely on bloodlines to be famous, they were still in the minority. Compared to cultivators with superb bloodlines, they were just an exception. Those without bloodlines, or those without powerful bloodlines, often had to put in more effort to become powerhouse. 10 times more effort was nothing. A person with a powerful bloodline was equivalent to having extraordinary talent and potential. As long as they cultivated the right cultivation method and obtained the right inheritance, they would be able to advance by leaps and bounds. The probability of becoming a powerhouse would also be more than 10 times higher than those without a bloodline. The ancient Phoenix bloodline was a sacred bloodline. It was considered quite good among the sacred bloodlines. The reason why Yunyinshin could break through to the sacred rank in such a short time was inseparable from the ancient Phoenix bloodline. Crippling one's bloodline meant crippling one's cultivation and strength. The ancient Phoenix bloodline was even more extraordinary. Once the ancient Phoenix bloodline was abolished, Yunyinshin would most likely be reduced to immortal, or even worse than immortal. Although the ancient Phoenix old ancestor didn't say it clearly, the meaning behind his words was clear to everyone. Chunzong's expression changed drastically. Abolish the bloodline. What that meant was very clear. Ancestor, is there no other way? Chunzong's voice was dull and cold. No. The ancient Phoenix ancestor's answer was incomparably firm, and the mocking expression on his face became even more obvious. Was there really no other way? Of course there was, but the ancient Phoenix ancestor didn't want to say it. If it weren't for the fact that she couldn't do anything to Chunzong, she would have already suppressed or even killed Chunzong. How could she be willing to tell him other ways? Forcing the ancient Phoenix ancestor to say it? Difficult. Not to mention that it was impossible now. Chunzong had a feeling that even if it was possible to suppress the ancient Phoenix ancestor, she might not say it. However, things hadn't happened yet. In life, anything was possible. Exhaling an extremely long breath, that breath crossed the sky like a sword. Chunzong calmed down and took a deep look at the ancient Phoenix ancestor. His figure turned into a sword light and appeared beside Yunyinshin. Let's go first, Chunzong said to Yunyinshin. Yunyinshin nodded and left with Chunzong. Looking at Chunzong and Yunyinshin leaving, the ancient Phoenix ancestor coldly snorted. Immediately, he soared into the sky, turned into a flame, and directly fled. As for the ancient Phoenix mountain that had already collapsed, he didn't care about it at all. It was very likely that the ancient Phoenix Mountain would decline from now on. The news of this battle couldn't be blocked. Sooner or later, it would spread out and build Chunzong's reputation. Don't worry, after a while, when my cultivation is improved and my strength is stronger, I will come back to find the ancient Phoenix ancestor and suppress him. Chunzong said to Yunyinxin. At that time, I will force the ancient Phoenix ancestor to say other ways to remove the seal. Yunyinxin nodded, but seemed to be thinking about it. Regarding the matter of the seal, he first looked for the Star Sword Master, then the Eternal Sword Master, and then the ancient Phoenix ancestor, but he couldn't remove it. Chunzong brought Yunyinxin back to the 10,000 sword ancient domain to find the Eternal Sword Master again. He repeated the words of the ancient Phoenix ancestor to the Eternal Sword Master and told him. After the Eternal Sword Master heard this, he carefully checked again and frowned. In the end, the Eternal Sword Master shook his head and said to Chunzong with a bit of apology, "Last time, I was wrong. If you want to forcefully break the seal, not only will it damage your bloodline origin, but it will also damage your divine soul." These words immediately made Chunzong frown. Yunyinxin's face turned pale in an instant, but she recovered in an instant. Damaging one's bloodline origin was only slightly better than destroying one's bloodline, but it wasn't impossible to recover. It was just that it would take a long time and a lot of treasures, but it would also damage one's divine soul, which was even more troublesome. It wasn't much better than destroying one's bloodline. If one's bloodline origin and divine soul were both damaged, it was equivalent to adding injuries on top of injuries. It would undoubtedly be more difficult to recover. Cultivate diligently. Perhaps when your Tao companion breaks through to the sacred ancestor level one day, she will naturally be able to break through the bloodline seal and recover her memories. The Sword Master of the Eternal Sword Side. These were actually words of consolation. Divine Ancestor. It was an extremely difficult achievement. Since ancient times, there have been many great saints, but only a small number of them could become divine ancestors in the end. At most, it was only 1%. Moreover, Yunyinxin's bloodline originated from the sacred beast Ancient Phoenix. At the beginning, she did indeed receive the blessing of the sacred Ancient Phoenix bloodline. Regardless of cultivation or combat strength, she was outstanding. But in fact, at the level of the Eternal Sword Master, bloodline was no longer important. This was because although bloodline was good and was a great help in the early stages, it could become a shackle in the later stages. The ancient Phoenix Patriarch was a sacred beast, which was equivalent to the divine ancestor level. The upper limit of the bloodline she had passed down was the divine ancestor level. Moreover, it was in the lower middle of the divine ancestor level. After all, the ancient Phoenix Patriarch was considered to be in the lower middle of the divine ancestor level. Under such bloodline shackles, it was extremely difficult to break through to the divine ancestor level. Therefore, it was very difficult to wait for Yunyinxin to break through to the divine ancestor level on her own. The chances were slim. Even if it was possible, who knew how long it would take? It would be very long. Since even the Eternal Sword Master was helpless, they could only give up for now. After a discussion, Chunzong and Yunyinxin decided they would leave the ancient mystic world and return to the outer universe. Although the ancient mystic world was very good, the two of them came from the outer universe. It was only right that they return to the outer universe. The great array outside the Gate of Divinity and Demons had been completed, and the Gate of Divinity and Demons was once again sealed. With the Eternal Sword Master, a peak divine ancestor, and 2 great saints, as well as 2 more sword masters as reinforcements in a short period of time, even if the time and space Godlord attacked again, they would be able to resist. Once they made the decision, the 2 of them immediately left. Chunzong and Yunyinxin were both saints now. They were extremely powerful, and it was not difficult for them to leave the ancient mystic world. They first opened a passage to the interlayer universe and entered the interlayer universe's great undead world. The interlayer universe was not as strong as the inner universe. Therefore, very few powerhouses from the inner universe would enter the interlayer universe. Of course, there were a few cultivators who would enter the interlayer universe's great undead world to gain experience. In the great undead world, there were no fluctuations of vitality. Everywhere was filled with the aura of death, and it was very thick. A spatial rift suddenly appeared, and in an instant, it was cut open, forming a door. Then, two sword lights flew out from the door and descended into the great undead world. Nianxin, before I go back, I'll take care of a small grudge from back then. After Qinzong returned to the great undead world, he immediately smiled. Back then, in order to find the whereabouts of Nianxin, Qinzong stepped into the great undead world. When he left, he was attacked. It was an attack by a saint. If the third-generation Taihao had not attached some power to himself and blocked the attack, he would have been killed by the saint. Although he had accidentally wandered into the inner universe and survived, he had still been hunted down. Now that he was going to return to the outer universe and pass through this interlayer universe, he naturally had to settle the grudge from back then. Qinzong still remembered the attack of that power. The mixed origin heart force suddenly spread out, sweeping in all directions in an astonishing manner. In an instant, it swept through the surroundings and spread out mightily. Qinzong and Nianxin also flew up, turning into two sword lights and quickly searching. The great undead world was very vast. Although Qinzong's mixed origin heart force was very strong, it could not cover all of it. He could only search like this. The terrifying sword power was earth-shattering, suppressing countless undead to the point that they did not dare to move. Finally, Qinzong sensed the aura of the attack that had attacked him back then. That was an old lich. In Qinzong's perception, the old lich's strength was not ordinary. He was at the peak of the pristine saint realm and was very powerful. Moreover, the power of death that he had mastered was also very overbearing and terrifying. However, Qinzong was now a great sword saint, and a great sword saint who had fought fiercely with the ancient Phoenix Patriarch. He was a top great sword saint and was extremely powerful. One sword, Qinzong did not say much at all. He directly drew his sword and slashed out. The sword dragged a long golden light. It was silver and dazzling, and it instantly broke through the sky. Divine firmament. The speed of this sword was extremely fast. The moment the sword was drawn, it had already shot towards the old lich from tens of thousands of meters away. The moment the old lich sensed a life and death crisis, he wanted to dodge, but it was too late. He was completely unable to dodge and was pierced by the silver sword light. In an instant, the sword will filled the sky, and the sword chi raged, constantly destroying his tyrannical lich body. The old lich, who had lived for countless years and was a ferocious and awe-inspiring figure in the undead world, was killed by Qinzong's sword. The cause of his death was his finger of death. Chapter 3109. To the current Qinzong, killing the old lich who was at the peak of the pristine saint stage with a single strike of his sword was as easy as swatting a fly. Even if a powerhouse at the peak of the pristine saint stage was considered a supreme powerhouse in this world, he was still a powerhouse with tyrannical strength. However, Qinzong was even more powerful. After killing the old lich and settling a small grudge, Qinzong once again broke through the space and headed to the outer universe. In the outer universe, although it wasn't as powerful as the inner universe, it still had a dozen or so holy lands. In the past, because of the infernal demon cult and the purgatory demon gate, they had been caught off guard. With the addition of spies, 2 of the weaker holy lands had been destroyed. This had caused the other holy lands to be on high alert. After that, the Blue Ocean Clan, the leader of one of the peaks in Taihao Mountain, had betrayed Taihao Mountain and secretly sought refuge with the Purgatory Demon sect. This had caused a period of turmoil in Taihao Mountain and even caused some losses. However, that was all in the past. After Qinzong left, how was Taihao Mountain? How was the outer universe? Nothing was known. Only when he returned would he be able to find out. At this moment, in Taihao Mountain, the Grand Formation was operating. Traces of sword chi circled in the air and filled all directions. The sound of the sword humming was constantly heard, shaking the surrounding 10,000 miles. The The sword chi surged and wandered in all directions, killing the invaders. This was the sign that the mountain-guarding Grand Formation of Taihao Mountain was fully activated. The Grand Formation of Taihao Mountain had both offensive and defensive capabilities. Its defensive capabilities were even more powerful than its offensive capabilities. Outside the Grand Formation, there were many figures. Each of them was filled with a terrifying aura. They constantly bombarded the mountain-guarding Grand Formation in an attempt to break it. These figures included giant beasts that were dozens of meters in size. There were even giant beasts that were hundreds of meters in size. These giant beasts were like dragons and tigers. Their bodies were extremely strong, and their strength was unparalleled. It was not a problem for them to crush mountains. The giant beast and the other powerful cultivators with surging demonic auras made their moves. The great protective array of Taihao Mountain was constantly shaken. Rumbling sounds rang out, and layers of ripples spread out. It seemed like it was about to be broken. The people of Taihao Mountain, from the founding elders to the disciples, were all doing their best to maintain the formation with their own power. They were also attacking the outside of the formation. The secret of the formation was that the attacks from the outside would be blocked, while the attacks from the inside would be able to penetrate the formation and kill their way out. This was also the main reason why Taihao Mountain was able to hold on without being breached. However, the damage caused by these attacks was limited when they struck the demonic beast army of the Purgatory Demon Sect. Furthermore, there was a large group of demonic beasts even further away. They were like a surging tide as they unceasingly charged over, as though there was no end to them. At the highest point in the sky above Taihao Mountain, the sound of thunder surged and shook without end while boundless lightning raged through the surroundings. It was suffused with a terrifying might capable of destroying everything in the world and shattering the stars. It was precisely a fierce battle between saint rank experts. On one side was the third-generation Taihao of Taihao Mountain, a great sword saint. On the other side were two huge demon gods. They were the saint rank experts of the Purgatory Demon Sect, and they were at the great saint rank. Although the third-generation Taihao was very strong, he could only hold on and not be defeated. He was unable to reinforce Taihao Mountain. Fight, fight, fight! Most of the disciples of Taihao Mountain were maintaining the great protective array so that it would not be broken. However, every time it was attacked, part of the force of the attack would also affect the disciples. Immediately, these disciples were shaken and spat out blood. Many corpses lay at their feet. Their robes were stained with blood, and their faces were pale. They were no longer breathing. Ha ha ha! You can't stop them. Taihao Mountain is just struggling in vain. Surrender early and join our divine gate. Only then will you have a chance to live. Cultivators of the Purgatory Demon Sect kept laughing and roaring, using this to disturb the minds of the disciples of Taihao Mountain and shake their will. Taihao Mountain is the holy land of the sword. We practice the sword all our lives. We would rather die than submit. We would rather die than submit. An elder roared, and the sound of swords resonated. Many disciples echoed, and their voices shook the heavens. This was a battle to the death. Ah, what a joke. Think about the great clan of the sky 10 years ago. That was a powerful holy land that was not inferior to your Taihao Mountain. They swore to die and refused to surrender. Now, even their bodies are gone. Even the saint level of the great clan of the sky has been made into a divine puppet by our divine gate. If you don't surrender, you will end up like the great clan of the sky. Everyone of Taihao Mountain was silent. It was not true that the great clan of the sky was not inferior to Taihao Mountain. At least, the strongest cultivators of the great clan of the sky were not as good as the third-generation Taihao Mountain. However, they were not inferior in other aspects. The great clan of the sky was destroyed 10 years ago because of the Purgatory Demon Sect. Now, 10 years later, even if Taihao Mountain had made many preparations, the Purgatory Demon Sect still launched an attack. They broke one sword city after another and came to Taihao Mountain. Now, they were blocked outside the great protective array of Taihao Mountain. However, according to the current situation, the Great Protective Array's defense was only temporary. It would be broken by the Purgatory Demon sect sooner or later. Once it was broken, the army of the Purgatory Demon sect would march straight in. Although Taihao Mountain swore to fight to the death, it was inevitable that they would be destroyed in the end. How tragic the consequences would be. But would they surrender? No. Even if they fought until their swords were broken and they died, they would not surrender. This was where the swordsmanship of Taihao Mountain was, and it was the unparalleled belief of the swordsmen of Taihao Mountain. Fight, fight, fight. Kill, kill, kill. With the Great Protective Array as the boundary, the army of demonic beasts of the Purgatory Demon sect continued to attack. They crashed into the Great Protective Array again and again, creating layers of ripples. They also bombarded the Great Protective Array until it caved in and even cracks appeared. But then, new forces came in and mended the cracks and flattened the Great Protective Array, continuing to resist the attack of the demonic beasts. Some of the people of Taihao Mountain did not maintain the Great Protective Array. Instead, they held their swords and constantly slashed out beams of astonishing sword chi and sword light. The sword light crisscrossed in all directions, shuttling back and forth, penetrating the defense of the Great Protective Array and slashing directly at the army of demonic beasts outside the Great Protective Array. When the sword light fell and exploded, it also took the lives of some demonic beasts, leaving sword scars on the bodies of some demonic beasts. These demonic beasts range from dozens of meters to hundreds of meters. The larger their bodies, the more violent and tyrannical the aura they exuded. Those demonic beasts that were hundreds of meters long had reached the peak of the half-saint level and were very terrifying. The second senior statesman shuttled back and forth. His figure was like a stream of light wandering around the edge of the Great Protective Array. He was only separated by one layer of the Great Protective Array. He constantly slashed out with his sword, and each sword was condensed with an incomparably terrifying evil spirit and murderous intent. This was the no-kill sword technique. When fully exerted, it had reached the peak of the half-saint level. When demonic beasts that were hundreds of meters long were slashed, although they would not die immediately, sword scars would be left on their bodies. Each sword scar was a dozen meters short and dozens of meters long. When demonic beasts that were less than 100 meters long were slashed, they would be cut in half and die a violent death. The second senior statesman had entered the Tao through killing, and he had created the no-kill sword technique himself. It could be said to be the model of the killing sword technique. It was very frightening. Each sword was capable of taking lives and chasing after souls. The more he killed, the more condensed the murderous intent around him became. It was almost as if it had materialized and wrapped around him. Everything within 100 meters was shrouded and filled. If anyone below the half-saint level got close, their blood and chi would be frozen, and even their spiritual soul would be paralyzed. The weaker ones would even be killed directly. The second senior statesman was the strongest cultivator below the saint level in Taihao Mountain. Even though he was running around waving his sword, it was difficult for him to kill all the demonic beasts. There were too many of them. He did not know where the Inferno Demon sect had found these demonic beasts. There were too many of them, and it seemed impossible to kill them all. Although the second senior statesman was very strong, he would eventually run out of strength. Moreover, there were demonic beasts that were hundreds of meters long in the demonic beast army. Some of them were as strong as the second senior statesman. If it had not been for the protective formation, Taihao Mountain would have been breached long ago. There was a loud boom. It was an earth-shattering explosion. Then, one part of the protective formation was directly bombarded by an extremely powerful force. The power of the formation, which was hundreds of meters long, suddenly caved in by dozens of meters. A black-robed figure was at the center of it. He threw a punch, and the defensive power of the formation caved in. With that punch, as the center, a crack suddenly appeared. Then, cracks began to spread in all directions. At the same time, some of the disciples of Taihao Mountain who were controlling the power of the formation could not help but tremble. It was as if they had been struck by an invisible thunderbolt. They immediately spat out a large mouthful of blood. Their faces were pale, and their auras dropped to the extreme. Some of the disciples even spat out blood. Cracks appeared on their bodies, and blood spurted out. Their vitality was quickly draining away like a torrent bursting a dam. That attack had almost broken the formation. It had directly killed dozens of disciples of Taihao Mountain and injured hundreds of them. Oh no! The second senior statesman's expression suddenly changed. He suddenly erupted with extreme speed, becoming one with his sword. His sword slashed across the sky with unparalleled killing intent. He directly used the strongest killing move of the no-killing sword mantra, tearing the sky apart. Kill! It was the most powerful attack. Unparalleled cold light gathered in the second senior statesman's eyes as he attacked. The power of the attack directly penetrated the defense of the protective formation and shot towards the black-robed figure. The black-robed figure raised his left arm, and terrifying power condensed on his arm. His muscles swelled up, and extremely powerful power lingered around him. It was like a surging river about to attack the formation again and completely destroy it. However, the second Grand Elder sword attack was the most powerful and deadly one. It was the second Grand Elder's most tyrannical sword attack. There was a faint sense of transcendence within it, as if it was about to surpass the half-step saint level and touch upon an even higher level. Sublimation. The attack immediately gave off a sense of sublimation. The cold light in the second senior statesman's eyes changed, becoming purer and purer. It seemed to reflect countless mysteries. Kill. The extremely powerful sword light slashed at the black-robed man, immediately tearing his black robe to shreds and slashing at his body. The second senior statesman believed that even a saint-level expert would not remain unscathed if they were struck by his attack. They would be injured immediately. However, after the sword light slashed through the black robe, it suddenly trembled as if a sharp sword had struck a piece of divine metal. It emitted an extremely ear-piercing sound of metal colliding, and then it shattered to reveal a completely black and red body. Recommended QQ Group. Heavenly Domain Sword Sect. 3981452229. It's a reading group. Those who like to chat on QQ can join. Chapter 3110. I'm begging for more monthly votes. The monthly votes are too little. My ranking is too low. Its blood-red body seemed to have been forged from divine metal. It was indestructible. The second Grand Elder's sword strike, which had surpassed the limits of his extremity, did not succeed at all. Instead, it shattered and turned into countless specks of light. It was a human, but also not a human. It had the shape of a human, but it was black and red. The skin on its body was like a layer of divine gold armor, which was indestructible. Its eyes were dull, and its movements were a little slow. The aura it exuded did not have the vitality that a human should have. Instead, it had a kind of stone-like rigidity. However, it was undeniable that its aura was very strong and violent. A puppet. The second senior statesman's expression was extremely serious. He even found that this was not an ordinary puppet, but a saint-level puppet. In other words, it was not a puppet, but a demonic puppet. It was made of the corpses of experts by the Inferno Demon Sect using a unique secret technique. In the Inferno Demon Sect, it was called a divine puppet. However, whether it was a demonic puppet or a divine puppet, it was just a name. Its essence was that it was a puppet made of the corpses of experts by the Inferno Demon Sect using a unique secret technique. Its body was extremely hard, as if it was made of divine gold. Its defensive power was amazing, and its strength was extremely terrifying. The second senior statesman recognized from the demonic puppet's face that it was the vice headmaster of the Great Sect of the Sky. The Great Sect of the Sky was a powerful holy land on par with the Taihao Mountain. It had a supreme saint and a little saint, and its vice headmaster was a little saint. Now, its supreme saint had died in battle, and its vice headmaster had been suppressed, captured, and refined into a demonic puppet to help the Inferno Demon Sect. Boom! The saint-level demonic puppet punched again. This time, it hit the formation again, Cracking sounds were heard, and more cracks appeared. The third punch, the fourth punch, the fifth punch. Each punch carried a terrifying power that could destroy mountains and shatter stars. It continuously bombarded the protective formation. Sword chi surged and bombarded the body of the saint-level demonic puppet, but it was shattered and could not be damaged at all. It was too tough. The body of the demonic puppet was too tough. After 5 consecutive punches, more and more cracks appeared. There was no time to repair them, and hundreds of Taihao Mountain disciples were killed by the shockwaves. Thousands of disciples were seriously injured and vomited blood. These disciples used their own strength to maintain the operation of the mountain-protecting Grand Formation. The more deaths and injuries there were, the slower and slower the replenishment of the Grand Formation's power, and its defensive capabilities gradually weakened. The sixth punch. This punch was like a comet descending from the sky and shattering everything in its path. Its power was terrifying, and it created a hole in the formation. His arm trembled, and a powerful force came from it. With the hole as the center, the formation shattered as if the sky was collapsing. A hole a few meters in size immediately appeared. Kill! The people of the Inferno Demon sect roared when they saw this scene. They immediately rushed towards the hole. The saint-level demonic puppet made another move, expanding the hole from a few meters to more than 10 meters wide. Its entire body rushed into the hole and killed its way into the Taihao Mountain. It was invincible. In just one exchange, the sword in the second statesman's hand was broken and he was sent flying. His chest collapsed and his sternum shattered. His internal organs burst and his body was covered with cracks. Blood gushed out of his wounds and blasted into a palace. Finally, he was embedded in a wall of the palace. All the bones in his body were broken, and his entire body was in tatters. If it weren't for his high cultivation level and tenacious vitality, the second statesman would have died. But even so, he was on his last breath and was not far from death. He had one eye that was still intact, but his vision had become blurry. The second statesman could vaguely see the saint-level demonic puppet killing its way into the Taihao Mountain. It was like a demonic tiger killing a herd of rabbits. It was invincible, and it took the lives of hundreds of Taihao Mountain disciples. The army of demonic beasts from the Inferno Demon sect also began to drive in through the broken formation. He wanted to move, but he couldn't. His strength was gone, and his vitality was fading rapidly. His consciousness began to fall into darkness. He was sinking into a bottomless abyss, never to wake up again. He couldn't accept it. The second statesman's heart was filled with unwillingness. It was an extremely strong unwillingness. It was as if he wanted to soar into the sky and shatter it, but he was also filled with helplessness and sorrow. He could only watch as his disciples were slaughtered. That feeling of helplessness made the second statesman feel hopeless. He fell into the abyss of despair. There seemed to be a buzzing sound. It seemed so vast and mighty, but in fact, it was very faint. Only the second statesman could hear it. Because he was about to fall into the abyss of despair, his entire being was in a state of silence. Unconsciously, his perception of his surroundings was raised to the extreme. It was extremely mysterious. He raised his only eye with difficulty. In his blurry vision, the second statesman seemed to see a crack appear. It was like a cloth being cut by a sharp sword. There seemed to be a flash of sword light. Could it be that another powerful enemy had invaded? Soon after, the second Grand Elder thought of something and felt like he had come to a sudden realization. That was sword light. A sword had cut open space. The Inferno Demon sect was not proficient in swordsmanship. Then who was it? Was it reinforcements? A glimmer of hope quietly grew in the second statesman's heart, which was about to completely fall into the bottomless abyss of despair. As soon as it appeared, it grew wildly, bringing with it a glimmer of hope. It pulled his mind out of the abyss of despair. His blurry vision seemed to clear up a little. He saw 2 figures step out of the crack in space at the same time. They stood in the middle of Taihao Mountain. One of the silhouettes looked somewhat familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere before. These 2 people were Chunzong and Union Shin. After settling a small grudge in the great undead world, Chunzong immediately left the great undead world with Yunyinshin and headed towards outer space. Back then, Chunzong had entered the great undead world through Taihao Mountain, so he had an impression of it. Now that his cultivation was extremely high and his realm was extremely high, he followed his impression of it and directly went through the void to find the aura of Taihao Mountain. He wanted to return directly. It was because of this that he took some time. However, being able to return directly saved him a lot of time compared to appearing in other places and then returning. It was just that Chunzong never expected to see such a scene when he returned. It was like the end of the world. Huge demonic beasts were rampaging, and the disciples of Taihao Mountain were being killed one after another. Even if they fought back with all their might, they could only kill a portion of the demonic beasts. Such a fight was very limited. Chunzong also saw a black-red figure. It was invincible. Any attack that landed on it was unable to cause any damage at all. He also saw the second statesman in the distance. His body was in tatters, like a pile of flesh and blood embedded in the wall. He was on the verge of death. He saw the Tianguang Peak Lord leading the elders and disciples and slashing with their swords to resist the invasion of the monster army. It was extremely difficult. The Tianguang Peak Lord had even lost an arm and was in imminent danger. He also saw the third-generation Taihao Mountain fighting fiercely with two great saint-level demons with surging demonic qi in the sky above Taihao Mountain. He was powerless to reinforce Taihao Mountain. Taihao Mountain was completely in a desperate situation. It was swaying in the wind and rain, like a broken boat in the middle of a stormy sea. It could be broken into pieces or even smashed to pieces at any time. Chunzong couldn't help but feel lucky that he had returned in time. If he had appeared in other places and had to rush back, it would have taken him some time. At that time, the second statesman would really be dead. The Tianguang Peak Lord would probably also be killed. Many disciples of Taihao Mountain would also be massacred. Anger. Tragic scenes flooded into the depths of Chunzong's eyes. They also ignited the anger and killing intent in Chunzong's heart. The Purgatory Demon Gate. If it had been back then, Chunzong would have been no match for the Purgatory Demon Gate and would have had to be extremely cautious. However, the Purgatory Demon Gate was nothing now. Kill. He instantly drew his sword and sliced through the air. It directly split into hundreds of sword chi and shot out. Each sword chi locked onto a demon beast. The demon beasts that were hundreds of meters long and even dozens of meters long were all locked onto. In the next moment, they were directly pierced and torn apart. These powerful demon beasts were half saint level, which was equivalent to the ultimate heavenly realm in the ancient mystic world of the inner universe. They might not be much in the inner universe, but in the outer universe, they were extremely terrifying and invincible. However, in the face of the sword chi that burst out from Chunzong's sword, they couldn't resist at all and were all killed. The sword cultivators of Taihao Mountain, who were fighting endlessly, only saw a flash of sword light before their eyes. It was as if it had come from nothingness. The tyrannical demon beast directly fell to the ground and died. This sword had directly saved thousands of sword cultivators of Taihao Mountain. However, it was still not enough. Yunyinshin also drew his Qinhuang sword and slashed it across the sky. An extremely loud cry suddenly rang out, and an extremely stunning sword light was slashed out. Then, the sword light split into hundreds of fiery birds the size of a palm and flew out in a row, killing hundreds of demon beasts and burning them to ashes. These two swords had directly intimidated the army of demon beasts. After all, more than 1,000 powerful demon beasts had died at once. This was no small matter. Just now, less than 1,000 demon beasts had died from the beginning of the attack to the breaking of the formation, and that was over the course of many days. Now, more than 1,000 demon beasts had died in the short span of a breath. What a heavy loss. In an instant, all eyes were fixed on the two figures wielding the swords. The Purgatory Demon Gate was surprised and horrified, while the Taihao Mountain side was shocked. Some of them were even startled and then ecstatic, such as the Tianguang Peak Lord and others. It was a familiar face and a familiar figure who had returned after being away for many years. At the same time, the saint-level demon puppet of the Purgatory Demon Gate also exploded with terrifying speed. It charged over as if it could shatter the stars. It directly turned into a black and red stream of light, like a violent thunderbolt that could destroy everything in its path. Everywhere it passed, the void collapsed, and the ground was even split open with shocking cracks. Attack! The saint-level demon puppet exploded with all its strength and attacked with all its might. It wanted to kill these two people in one blow and blast them to smithereens in order to intimidate Taihao Mountain and completely cut off all hope of Taihao Mountain. It wanted to completely shatter the hearts and bodies of the sword cultivators of Taihao Mountain. In the face of this extremely tyrannical black and red lightning, with an incomparably dense aura and surging demonic qi, Chunzong's lips curled into a cold smile. Chapter 3111. Be careful. The Tianguang Peak Lord's expression changed, and he immediately shouted to warn Chunzong. Chunzong had left. Now that he had returned, he might be even more powerful. However, that was a sage-level demon puppet, which was equivalent to a sage-level expert. Could Chunzong block it? As the Peak Master of Tianguang yelled, he saw Chunzong gazing at him. After the Peak Master of Tianguang smiled at him, Chunzong disappeared in a flash. When he reappeared, he was already at the second Founding Elder's place. As for Union Xin, she did not move. Facing the sage-level demon puppet that was charging at her with a violent demonic aura, a faint smile appeared on her face. She continued to wave her sword. On the green, brilliant sword, the cry of a phoenix reverberated in all directions. The surrounding void cracked and cracks spread. Countless spatial turbulences poured out as if they were going to destroy everything. Slash! The scarlet-red sword light broke through the air and was suffused with a faint golden color. It was like a long golden river. Immediately, the sword light transformed into a scarlet flame heavenly phoenix that was dozens of meters in size. It soared through the air and shattered the space wherever it passed. Countless spatial turbulence poured out like a flood that had burst a dam and directly bombarded the black-red demonic puppet. It paused. Then, the black-red demon puppet was sent flying. As its body trembled violently, it was slashed by the sword qi. With just one sword strike, the body of a saint-level demon puppet was extremely strong. Even a pristine saint stage expert would find it difficult to destroy it. However, it was directly sent flying hundreds of meters away. When it landed on the ground, its body was covered with sword marks that crisscrossed in a terrifying manner. Its body was constantly burning with crimson flames as if it would never be extinguished. Everyone was stunned. Everyone was dumbfounded. What kind of strength was this? With just one slash, she had repelled the sage-level demon puppet and caused such terrible damage. However, the demon puppet charged at her again. Demon puppets did not have any so-called vital points or senses. Unless they were completely destroyed, they would not be able to fight. Union Xin frowned slightly. Then, she relaxed and waved her sword again. Sacred Phoenix, swordsmanship. Burning Phoenix. This sword was his ultimate move. The Scarlet Flame Heavenly Phoenix, which was hundreds of meters long, appeared and attacked again. The power of this attack was even more terrifying. It directly slammed into the Saint Realm Demon Puppet and forced it to retreat. As it retreated, it endured the terrifying impact and burning of the Ardent Phoenix. After a few thousand meters, the Saint Realm Demon Puppet's body was broken and gradually became charred black under the burning of the Ardent Phoenix. He struggled to get up and charge forward once again. However, his speed had obviously decreased by more than half. When he charged in front of Union Xin, he directly fell forward and was burned to ashes by the extremely violent flames of the Ardent Phoenix. However, the flames did not extinguish and continued to burn until he was reduced to ashes. This scene stunned countless people. Saint level. That was a saint level demon puppet. Only saint level experts could defeat it. Even if they were also saint level experts, it would be extremely difficult to kill it unless they had an absolute advantage in strength. But now, He had been killed by a sword cultivator he had never seen before. He had been burned to ashes by the terrifying flames. What kind of strength was that? It was simply unimaginable. The Purgatory Demon Gate had originally broken through the protection of the Great Array and killed their way into Taihao Mountain. They were filled with murderous intent and wanted to destroy Taihao Mountain. However, this scene made them extremely shocked and horrified. Although those demon beasts were frenzied and did not have intelligence, they still had instincts. They felt that something was wrong. They were horrified, and their bodies went weak for no reason. That kind of aura was a direct suppression from the bloodline. It was like a beggar facing a nobleman. There was complete silence. Suddenly, there was a loud laughter. At first, the laughter was faint and seemed to be somewhat weak. However, it soon became vigorous and strong, carrying a powerful sword aura that rushed into the sky and exploded. Chunzong had already rescued the second founding elder and used the powerful elixir he had brought back from the Innerverse to restore him. At the same time, he had also given the second founding elder 3 strands of subdivinity. That day, he had killed many gods and demons. The main divinity was given to Yunyanxin to refine and absorb, while the spiritual divinity was refined and absorbed by Chunzong himself. However, he had also left behind some subdivinity. There were not many, only a dozen or so strands in total. The rest of the subdivinity was given to the quasi-sages of the 10,000 Swords ancient realm to give them hope of re-entering the saint level. Some of it was also given to the more outstanding heaven realm to increase their chances of entering the saint level. With the 3 strands of subdivinity, the second founding elder had not only completely recovered, but his aura was also constantly rising and becoming more tyrannical. The sword aura rushed into the sky and stirred up the wind and clouds, mighty and mighty, in all directions. The understanding of the sublimation of the sword from the extreme realm also became clearer. It was as if he had truly broken through the shackles, and the path ahead became clear. Rumble. In the sky, dark clouds rolled and gathered. Bolts of dazzling lightning shuttled back and forth like thunder dragons roaring endlessly. Each bolt of lightning exuded an extremely terrifying aura, as if it wanted to destroy everything. The vast and mighty lightning transformed into a sea of thunder. The deafening sound of thunder rumbled through the heavens and the earth. Countless cracks were everywhere, and spatial turbulence poured out in a frenzy. A heavenly tribulation. This was a heavenly tribulation, also known as a saint's tribulation. It was a tribulation that had to be experienced in order to enter the saint level in the outerverse. Passing the heavenly tribulation would allow one to enter the saint level, but failing it would cause one to turn into ashes. There was no such thing as luck. Throughout the history of the Innerverse, countless half-sages had fallen under the saint's tribulation. Their bodies were destroyed, their souls scattered, and they were completely destroyed. Now, the second founding elder was about to undergo the saint's tribulation. Once he passed it, he would become a saint-level powerhouse, and Mount Taihao would gain another saint-level powerhouse. If he failed, he would turn into ashes, which would be a great loss. However, the saint's tribulation was irreplaceable and could not be helped. One had to undergo it himself, and whether or not he could survive it depended on himself. Don't let him undergo the tribulation, a powerhouse from the Inferno Demon Gate suddenly shouted. If Mount Taihao gained another saint-level powerhouse, it would not be a good thing for them. If they interfered and interrupted, the tribulation would fail. But with Chunzong and Yunyanxin here, how could the Inferno Demon Gate stand chance? Kill! Chunzong's figure flashed, and he held his sword across the sky. With a slash of his sword, he killed thousands of people and monsters from the Inferno Demon Gate. The sword light pierced through the sky, and the swords connected. The last slash of his sword was 100,000 meters long, and it killed countless people and monsters from the Inferno Demon Gate. None of them could resist Chunzong's sword chi, and it was invincible. Chunzong did not even use his full strength. He only used a small part of his strength, because if he used his full strength, even Mount Taihao would not be able to withstand it. Even so, the Inferno Demon Gate was still defeated by Chunzong's sword, and countless people died. This scene made the swordsmen of Mount Taihao feel relieved and shocked. The saint's tribulation also descended. The thunderbolt was like a shocking sword light that split heaven and earth, and it flew across the sky and blasted toward Elder. Second Elder. Second Elder held the broken sword in his hand, and his eyes shone with incomparable sword light. His sword will skyrocketed, and he directly slashed toward the thunderbolt with his sword. The tribulation began. On one side, Chunzong and Yunyanxin were waving their swords, killing people from the Inferno Demon Gate. With the two of them working together, the Inferno Demon Gate could no longer cause any damage to Mount Taihao. Instead, they were scared out of their wits, and they all hurriedly fled, trying to get away. All of you will die. Chunzong's voice was full of fierce, murderous intent. The Inferno Demon Gate had caused so much damage and casualties to Mount Taihao. He wanted to kill all of them, and no one would be able to escape. Chunzong's figure flashed, and he directly transformed into hundreds of figures scattered all around. Each figure seemed to be real, and they all held long swords in their hands, sweeping through the sky. This was not a superb technique. It was formed by Chunzong's sudden burst of extreme speed and some small tricks. In the inner verse, such tricks were difficult to perform, but in the outer verse, it was different. It was as if he had broken free from his shackles, and it became easy. Not long after, the people of the Inferno Demon Gate died one after another under the swords of Chunzong and Yunyanxin. Most of them died under Chunzong's sword, and a few of them had already rushed out of the protective formation and into the distant universe. Chunzong smiled coldly. His body did not move, but he slashed out with his sword. The sword light directly escaped into the void and penetrated hundreds of thousands of meters, killing all of them in an instant. At this point, the invaders of the Inferno Demon Gate and the army of monsters were all wiped out. The disciples of Taihao Mountain cheered at first, but when they saw the corpses of their fellow disciples around them, they could not help but fall silent. Grief welled up in their hearts, and tears flowed down their cheeks. It was too tragic. On the other side, the second founding elder was still undergoing his tribulation. Although his sword was broken, it still had terrifying power. This life and death experience had completely enlightened the second founding elder, and he had a breakthrough in his swordsmanship. With the help of the power of 3 demigod divinities, his sword cut through the lightning. "Wait for me here," Chunzong said to Yunyanxin, and then he turned into a sword light and soared into the sky because the battle was not over. In the sky above, the third founding elder, Taihao, was facing the 2 great saints of the Inferno Demon Gate with his sword. He resisted with his powerful swordsmanship, but he was unable to reinforce Taihao Mountain. Otherwise, with Taihao around, things would not have turned out this way. However, Chunzong was also puzzled. Why did he not see the first founding elder? He was a saint, and even if he was only a pristine saint, he was still a great powerhouse in the outer verse. If the first founding elder was here, Taihao Mountain would not have been reduced to such a state with so many casualties. Now is not the time to ask about this. He had to reinforce the third founding elder first. With a sword in hand, the third founding elder displayed powerful swordsmanship to meet the 2 great demon gods. However, the strength of the 2 demon gods was so great that the third founding elder fell into a disadvantageous position. This was because the 2 demon gods were not only powerful, but their bodies were also extremely tough and resilient. Their self-healing abilities were amazing. Even if they were hit by the third founding elder, they would not be seriously injured. Instead, they would recover in a short time. As a result, the third founding elder fell into a bitter battle. His strength was constantly being depleted. If this continued, he would not be able to defeat his opponents even if he exhausted all his strength. The 2 demon gods also constantly spoke to disturb the third founding elder's mind. The third founding elder also noticed the miserable scene below. Suddenly, an extremely powerful streak of light shot into the sky. With unparalleled might, it shot through the air in a mighty manner, directly killing a demon god as soon as it arrived. It shot through the air without any hesitation at all. Chapter 31:12. The sword light pierced through the air, tearing the universe apart and shattering the stars. The sword might was boundless, and the sword intent was vast. It carried an incomparable murderous intent as it swept across 100 miles like divine thunder, splitting the world. It was invincible. One of the demon gods was directly hit, locked, and stunned by the monstrous sword might. He was momentarily dazed, and that momentary daze doomed him to be unable to dodge the sword. The sword light slashed past, rushing into the endless universe and disappearing. The demon god immediately let out a blood-curdling scream. His body was 100 meters tall and extremely huge. His body was also very tyrannical. However, under this sword, his entire chest and abdomen were split open like tofu. Blood flowed out endlessly. Although he didn't die, he was severely injured. His powerful self-healing ability was about to take effect, healing the sword wound on his chest that was more than 20 meters long. However, there was an extremely terrifying sword chi and sword intent lingering around it. It was difficult to erase it, making it difficult for his injury to heal. The streak of sword light had appeared so abruptly and was so powerful that it directly intimidated the two fiendish demons. Taihao III was also shocked. However, he reacted quickly and immediately seized the opportunity to unleash a sword strike. He turned into a blazing sun and attacked the other fiendish demon god. He couldn't dodge in time and could only barely cross his arms to block Taihao, the third sword. His huge body was immediately sent flying back hundreds of meters. The blazing sun exploded, and countless blazing sun sword chi broke through the air. "Hurry up and leave." The demon god immediately roared, beckoning the other demon god to retreat. It turned out that 2 against 1 was enough to take down Taihao III after a long battle and even refine him into a divine puppet. As long as Taihao III was refined into a divine puppet, he would become an extremely terrifying existence and strengthen the purgatory divine sect again. Unfortunately, something unexpected happened. An unknown and powerful sword saint had arrived and injured one of the demonic gods with a single strike. The injury was not light either, so their advantage was destroyed. They also noticed that the situation at Mount Taihao was not right. Corpses of people and demonic beasts from the Purgatory Divine School were strewn all over the place. If the situation was really bad, they had to leave immediately. If those disciples and demon beasts died, then so be it. They could still obtain them again. However, it was very difficult for Great Sage Realm powerhouses like them to do so. Want to leave? It's too late. A voice full of killing intent came with a shocking sword might. It shook the void and was accompanied by a shocking sword light. Quick! That sword light was indeed incomparably fast. It was like a silver divine radiance that traversed the universe. It was beyond imagination. The third generation Taihao only saw a flash in front of his eyes before the silver divine radiance pierced through the air. Divine firmament. Even if there was no outburst, the speed of this sword was extremely fast, and it was impossible to avoid. One should know that the current Qinzong had the strength of the Great Sage Peak without using the sea-suppressing pearl, which was very tyrannical. This sword focused on speed and sharpness. It was unparalleled in speed and invincible in its sharpness. The demon god, who had already been hit by Qinzong's sword, could not dodge or block it. His crossed arms were directly pierced through, and then his body was also pierced through. The sword chi continued to wreak havoc and destruction. However, the demon god did not die. Its body was tough, and its life force was incredibly strong. As it screamed, it immediately erupted with extreme speed and fled into the distance. "I told you can't escape." Qinzong's expression was cold, and his murderous aura shook the 9 heavens. His figure flashed, and he immediately gave chase. As for the other demon god, it used a secret technique to escape in a different direction, and the third generation Taihao could not catch up. One was chasing, and the other was fleeing. Although the demon god, who had been hit by Chun Zong's sword twice in a row, was very fierce and had used a secret technique to escape at an even faster speed. Chun Zong continued to close in, and another divine firmament sword arrived at an even faster speed. The third time the demon god was hit, the sword chi raged and erupted, and the demon god's speed suddenly decreased. Die! Chun Zong's sword swept across the sky, and the shadow of a star seemed to have traversed endless time and space to descend from the ancient times. An unparalleled, earth-shattering pressure swept across the sky, suppressing all directions. Time and space seemed to have stopped in an instant, and the demon god's body seemed to be bound and frozen in the void, unable to move. Horrifying. The demon god was extremely horrified. What had happened? Why couldn't he move? Even if he constantly unleashed his power, he could not move. His entire body seemed to be firmly frozen. Why was it like this? At the same time, Chun Zong swung his sword, and the shadow of the ancient stars broke through the sword and crushed forward. Its speed was not as fast as divine firmaments, but it was not too slow either. After the sword left, its speed continued to increase, becoming faster and faster as it bombarded the demon god. Heaven and earth roared, and the universe was vast and mighty. The momentum was so overbearing that the entire universe seemed to be on the verge of shattering. Ancient stars. The demon god's 100-meter-tall body was directly bombarded by the ancient stars. He could not dodge at all, nor could he resist. Under the impact of the ancient stars, his tyrannical body was instantly shattered and pulverized inch by inch. The strike was unstoppable. It tore apart the fiendish demon god's extremely tough body, creating a 10-meter-wide hole that extended from the fiendish demon god's back to its chest. A 10-meter-wide hole appeared in his entire chest, and the sword chi raged endlessly. Even with the demon god's tyrannical body and astonishing vitality, he could not withstand it. His vitality was rapidly draining away, and his aura weakened as well. Death. As for the other demon god, he successfully escaped in another direction. He was very decisive. If he had hesitated for a moment, he would not have been able to escape. When he returned, he saw the third-generation Tai Hao. When he saw Chun Zong, the third-generation Tai Hao's face was filled with shock. That feeling could no longer be described with words. How long had it been? It had only been 100 or 200 years, and Chun Zong had already become so powerful, even surpassing him. It was unimaginable. Back then, the third-generation Tai Hao thought highly of Chun Zong and regarded him as the successor of Tai Hao. He groomed him as the fourth-generation Tai Hao, but it was not so easy to become the fourth-generation Tai Hao. It was not something that could be achieved in just a few hundred years. For example, it took the third-generation Tai Hao several thousand years to comprehend and advance to the saint level, but it was still not enough. To truly succeed Tai Hao, one must be a great saint. Therefore, it took him tens of thousands of years to finally reach the great saint realm and succeed Tai Hao as the third-generation Tai Hao. Therefore, after the third-generation Tai Hao thought highly of Chun Zong, he decided to wait for him for tens of thousands of years. He did not expect that after only 100 or 200 years, Chun Zong, who seemed to have disappeared without a trace, would return with the strength of a great saint, even stronger than himself. The third-generation Tai Hao thought that he was dreaming. Chun Zong returned with Yun Yinshin at the critical moment when Tai Hao Mountain was on the verge of destruction. The two of them slaughtered the army of the Inferno Demon Sect and saved Tai Hao Mountain from danger. Sword Saint Qing, Huang Yun Yinshin, even killed a saint-level demon puppet with 2 strikes. Sword Saint Peerless Chun Zong used 4 strikes. Killing a great saint-level demon god caused the Inferno Demon Sect to suffer heavy losses. Such a battle achievement was incomparably shocking to the extreme. Without any concealment, it was immediately spread out. With astonishing speed, it swept out like a storm, spreading in all directions and shaking the world. At this point, the Holy Land Alliance and other forces of the universe were overjoyed and excited, while the Inferno Demon Sect and the Infernal Order turned pale with fright. After the war, Taihao Mountain was in ruins. The number of disciples killed and injured added up to more than 10,000. The loss could be said to be heavy, but fortunately, Chunzong returned and rescued Taihao Mountain from danger. Now, Taihao Mountain was reorganizing after the war. Everything was waiting to be done. Although the loss was heavy, Chunzong's powerful strength and attitude made the surviving disciples excited and boosted their morale. It was because he was a disciple of Taihao Mountain. With such tyrannical strength, he was a saint-level venerable. Moreover, it was said that his strength was so tyrannical that the average saint level was no match for him at all. In addition, Sword Saint Qing Huang, the partner of Sword Saint Peerless Chunzong, was also a saint-level expert. Her strength was also very strong. She defeated and killed a saint-level demon puppet of the Inferno demon sect with 2 strikes. Sword Saint Chunzong was a member of Taihao Mountain. His partner could also be considered as half a member of Taihao Mountain. In addition to the 3rd generation Taihao, and now that the 2nd Grand Elder had broken through to the saint level, Taihao Mountain had 4 saint-level experts. Peak. Beyond the past. Even when Taihao Mountain was at its peak, there had never been 4 saint-level experts. This was a breakthrough that surpassed the past and present. Such experts were the backbone of a force. Only with experts in charge could a force ensure the continuation of its inheritance, development, and growth, and recruit more and more outstanding disciples. Now, Taihao Mountain had 4 saint-level experts. Except for the 2nd Grand Elder who had just broken through, the other 3 saint-level experts were very powerful and extraordinary. The disciples were discussing excitedly as they tidied up Taihao Mountain after the war. In the main hall of Taihao Mountain's main peak, all the higher-ups of Taihao Mountain gathered here. Even a 3rd generation Taihao, who rarely showed his face, was sitting here. Chunzong asked about the changes in the past few years. After all, he went to the inner universe and didn't know anything about the outer universe. The 2nd Grand Elder, who had just broken through to the saint level, told Chunzong about the major events that had happened in the past 100 years or so. In the past 100 years, the God-worship sect had grown stronger and stronger. Now, many universes had fallen into their sphere of influence. The infernal demon sect and the infernal order's development was also very shocking. They seemed to have been silent for a long time and suddenly burst out, occupying many universes and even territories. Originally, there were more than a dozen holy lands in the outer universe. However, after being attacked by the infernal demon sect and the infernal order, 6 holy lands had become history. This time, if Chunzong hadn't returned in time and saved Taihao Mountain from a crisis of life and death, Taihao Mountain would have become the 7th holy land to be destroyed. As for the master of Taihao Mountain, he had been training outside for many years. When he returned, he was ambushed by the infernal order, and his fate was unknown. As for the 1st senior elder, he was a saint-level expert who had been surrounded and killed by the purgatory demon sect. Unwilling to be captured and refined into a demon puppet, he chose to self-detonate. Although he had killed many of the purgatory demon sect's experts, he had perished in the process. Since the master's fate was unknown and the 1st Grand Elder died, the infernal demon sect launched a general attack on Taihao Mountain. Chapter 31:13. After the battle, Mount Taihao had many things to do. The 4 saint-level cultivators had boosted the fighting power of Mount Taihao to an astonishing level, greatly inspiring the remaining disciples of Mount Taihao. The disciples who survived the battle had further stimulated their potential. There was hope for them to improve their cultivation, swordsmanship, and strength in a short time. Although they had suffered great losses in the battle, they had also gained many benefits. The biggest advantage was that Mount Taihao was still standing. It would not fall. The mountain-guarding Grand Array had been rebuilt. Some of the resources and treasures that Chunzong had brought back from the inner universe could also be put to good use. After further strengthening the mountain-guarding Grand Array, even if the army of the Purgatory Demon Sect were to attack, it would be much more difficult to break it. I'll find a suitable time and hold a ceremony to pass the position of Taihao to you, the third-generation Taihao, said to Chunzong. It's not suitable. Chunzong shook his head. Due to some reasons, I've embarked on an unprecedented path of cultivation. The third-generation Taihao stared at Chunzong carefully. He sensed Chunzong carefully, but he felt that Chunzong's aura was completely restrained. It seemed ordinary, but it was also as deep as the abyss. It was like the vast universe, unfathomable. If even he, a great sword saint, couldn't measure it, how amazing would it be? You'll have to find another successor, Chunzong said with a smile. Now, the two were on the same level, but Chunzong still respected the third-generation Taihao very much. However, he didn't have to be as respectful in his words as he had been in the past. It was enough to keep this gratitude and respect in the bottom of his heart. Since Chunzong had said so, the third-generation Taihao didn't say anything, although he felt a little regretful. He just chatted with Chunzong and seemed to be thinking about something. Chunzong also told him part of his experience, mainly mentioning his encounter with the first-generation Taihao in the sky-reaching tower. The third Taihao was very excited, but after knowing that the first Taihao had died, the sorrow and loneliness he felt was indescribable. Chunzong had also passed on the Taihao sword art, which the first Taihao had accumulated throughout his life, to the third Taihao. The sword art was extremely powerful and would be of great benefit to the third Taihao. In the end, Chunzong said goodbye and planned to leave Mount Taihao. Chunzong, which sacred ground did your Tao companion come from? Taihao of the third generation suddenly asked. Chunzong paused for a moment. She's an individual cultivator. Originally, from the perspective of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court, she wanted to enter the Taihao Mountain, but accidentally wandered into the inner layer of the universe's ancient mystic world and became the goddess of the ancient Phoenix Mountain. But now, it was equivalent to leaving the ancient Phoenix Mountain. It was also true that she was an itinerant cultivator. A loose cultivator? The third-generation Taihao suddenly became excited. He took a deep breath and looked at Chunzong with some hope. Can she inherit the position of Taihao? Chunzong was slightly taken aback when he heard that. Let Yun Yinxin inherit the position of Taihao? It seemed feasible. However, he still needed to ask Yun Yinxin if it was feasible. After all, this was her business. Although Chunzong was her Tao companion, he couldn't make the decision on his own. Chunzong was somewhat tempted. Yun Yinxin had the ancient Phoenix bloodline and mastered the power of fire. Taihao also belonged to the power of fire. The two could be used together. Soon, Chunzong asked Yun Yinxin. Okay. Yun Yinxin responded in just 3 breaths. Okay. She was willing to inherit the position of Taihao and become the 4th-generation Taihao. Yun Yinxin was currently at the peak of the pristine saint stage, only a step away from the great saint stage. However, she didn't know how to break through that step. It wasn't easy. It could take a few years, or even a few hundred or a few thousand years. Since ancient times, it was normal for countless pristine saints to be stuck at the peak and unable to break through. Yun Yinxin had her own thoughts. Chunzong couldn't see through her, and she didn't want to say it. However, since she had made her choice, Chunzong didn't object. It was good to become the 4th-generation Taihao. Of course, it was just a wish. Only when Yun Yinxin broke through to the great saint stage would she be qualified to inherit the position of Taihao. Now, she could only be considered as the successor of Taihao. Next, Yun Yinxin released the Taihao spirit fire to comprehend and understand the mystery of the Taihao spirit. Once she understood it, she might be able to break through the pristine saint stage and step into the great saint stage. Next was to cultivate the Taihao swordsmanship. It wasn't the original Taihao swordsmanship, but the swordsmanship that Chunzong had obtained from the first Taihao. It was more advanced than the third Taihao's swordsmanship. It was a superior sword principle that surpassed the Holy Phoenix sword principle. It was only slightly inferior to the secret sword principles in the ancient mystic world. Yun Yinxin was talented, but it wasn't easy to master the Taihao sword principle. Fortunately, Chunzong was proficient in it and could guide her at any time. Therefore, Yun Yinxin, who had inherited the Taihao spirit fire, left Taihao Mountain with Chunzong. The third-generation Taihao watched them leave. In the past, he had condensed a wisp of the Taihao spirit fire for Chunzong. Now that he had condensed another wisp of the Taihao spirit fire after 100 or 200 years, it would take a longer time to recover. His strength had also decreased. Fortunately, the protective formation of the Taihao Mountains was in the process of being repaired. It would be done before long, so even if another powerful enemy invaded, it would be able to fend them off better. When the time came, the third Taihao would contact Chunzong through a secret technique, and Chunzong would return as soon as possible. With Chunzong's strength and attainments, he could easily tear space and travel through time in the outer universe and return to Taihao Mountain in a very short time. Even though the third-generation Taihao's strength had decreased due to the condensation of the Taihao spiritual fire, it had also increased due to the cultivation of the stronger Taihao swordsmanship. In fact, the overall strength of the third-generation Taihao didn't change. It was even stronger. After all, the new Taihao sword principle was much stronger than his original Taihao sword principle. Moreover, because they were of the same lineage, it wasn't difficult to cultivate. He had basically mastered it in a few months. Even if he was besieged by 3 great saints, the third-generation Taihao could still hold on for a while. Wanyuan Island. This was the most prosperous region in the Wanyuan territory. There used to be 3 emperor-level forces: the Wanyuan sect, the Yuanyuan Palace, and the Trade Wind Tower. Chunzong had stayed in the Trade Wind Tower for a while before he went to Taihao Mountain. Chunzong had feelings for the Trade Wind Tower and was very grateful to the Tower Master. Now that he had returned on a whim, he naturally wanted to take a look and see the place where he had stayed before. Everyone had feelings. Moreover, when the major forces migrated back then, he didn't know how Wanyuan Island was now. Had it been occupied by the god worship sect? After tearing space and time again, Chunzong quickly left Taihao Mountain with Yunyinxin and headed to Wanyuan Island. Taihao Mountain and Wanyuan Island were very far apart. Chunzong couldn't tear space and arrive directly. He still needed to do it several times. However, with Chunzong's speed, it wouldn't take long. At most, it would take less than a day. A spatial crack suddenly appeared on Wanyuan Island. It was like a thin piece of paper that had been sliced open by a sharp blade. Soon after, 2 figures stepped out from it. Chunzong arrived at Wanyuan Island with Yunyinxin. As soon as he arrived, Chunzong's expression changed involuntarily. There was something wrong with the aura of Wanyuan Island. There seemed to be a trace of a strange aura. Chunzong was very familiar with this aura. It was the aura of a fiend god. Had Wanyuan Island been occupied by a fiend god, he released the immemorial heart force and covered the entire Wanyuan Island in an instant. What he saw made Chunzong's expression turn cold and solemn. His aura was extremely bleak. Sure enough, Wanyuan Island had been occupied by the god worship sect. Wanyuan Island had directly become the territory of the god worship sect. Taking Yunyinxin with him, Chunzong flashed and immediately appeared in front of the Trade Wind Tower. However, the Trade Wind Tower was in ruins. From the traces left behind, it could be seen that a great battle had taken place here, and it was that great battle that led to the destruction of the Trade Wind Tower. However, didn't the Trade Wind sect move away back then? But looking at the traces, it seemed that they didn't. Where was the leader? Where did he go? Or did he die in the battle? Then, Chunzong investigated the Wanyuan sect and the palace of Yuanyuan. They were also destroyed. The major forces no longer existed. The only force left was the god worship sect. He caught people and interrogated them. Of course, he caught the followers of the god worship sect. Chunzong had many ways to make them confess all kinds of information they knew. It turned out that 50 years ago, the Trade Wind sect and the other forces returned. Because the god worship sect hadn't come to their doorstep for decades, and the major forces had been operating in Wanyuan Island for many years. Their development in other places was limited after all, and they had conflicts with other forces. It was difficult for them to stabilize. When they felt that there was no danger, they simply returned. The decades after their return were indeed stable. However, 10 years ago, the Eagle God sect came again with even more experts. The Eagle God's clone directly attacked and seriously injured Sect Master Wanrun, Palace Master Yuanyuan, the Trade Wind Sect Master, and the Alliance Master of the Rogue Cultivator Alliance. Many experts were killed, but many surrendered and joined the Eagle God sect, eventually becoming its followers. The masters of the four major forces fled with some of their disciples into the small world of boulders with their injured bodies and closed it, preventing the Eagle God sect from entering. After 10 years of development, the entire Wanyuan Island was completely under the Eagle God sect's control. Even the small world of boulders inside the island was constantly being attacked and was on the verge of breaking open. As for the other universes in Wanyuan Island, they hadn't been attacked much by the Eagle God sect for the time being. This was because most of the Eagle God sect's forces were concentrated on Wanyuan Island, and they had to open the small world of boulders first. However, some of them had already been taken over by the Eagle God sect. After interrogating the follower, Chunzong casually pointed a finger and killed the follower. All followers were contributing their faith to the God Fiends so that they could better adapt to the universe's environment, unleash their strength, and slowly grow stronger. This was helping the enemy. They should be killed. Let's go kill the God Fiends, Chunzong said to Yunyanxin. Yunyanxin nodded and immediately set off with Chunzong, flying towards the Eagle God sect's headquarters. In the headquarters of the Eagle God sect, many followers were gathered there. There were 7th Realm, 6th Realm, 5th Realm, and 4th Realm cultivators. All of them were contributing their faith to the Eagle God sect and receiving feedback from the God Fiend's power. They were enveloped by the God Fiend's aura, and their combat strength had obviously increased. To countless cultivators, this was a great temptation. In the headquarters of the Eagle God sect, there was a 100-meter-tall statue of an eagle with a human body. It was vivid and lifelike and exuded an endless divine aura that covered all directions. Any follower who came into contact with this divine aura would feel that the divine aura was as vast as the ocean, but they wouldn't be harmed. However, if non-followers came into contact with this divine aura, they would be suppressed and tempted. In the end, they would succumb to it and become a follower again. Chapter 31:14. Thousands of believers had gathered in the main church and were kneeling down to worship the 100-meter-tall statue. They were contributing their faith to the God they believed in. Even if one person's faith power was very weak, it could accumulate and be absorbed by the sea. Divine power covered all directions. As the statue received more and more faith, it expanded and strengthened bit by bit. Suddenly, a vast and mighty sword might descended and collided with the divine might. It was formless, colorless, and formless yet terrifying to the extreme. It was as if two stars were colliding with each other. In an instant, it shook like a tsunami and a landslide, vast and boundless. Under the divine power, the believers' bodies suddenly swayed. They were like pedestrians in an earthquake or small boats in a tsunami. What's going on? What happened? Is our God angry? The believers' reactions were different, but they were all shocked. They all looked up at the statue, but the statue didn't move. Immediately after, a terrifying sword might tore apart the divine might and suddenly attacked. It was accompanied by a shocking sword light that covered the sky and the earth. The sword pressure suppressed the entire area. In the face of such a terrifying sword might, the statue suddenly trembled. Its eyes emitted a cold light that was thousands of feet long, and its divine might increased tenfold in an instant. The entire statue flickered with intense golden light. This scene immediately made the believers cheer. They were very excited, but it was useless. When the sword light fell, it didn't show any mercy. It directly killed all the believers. It killed all of them. It was because these believers wouldn't be able to completely recover just by killing that god. Their natures were already different from before. Leaving them behind would also be a type of disaster. Under the sword light, thousands of believers couldn't block it. Not in the 4th Realm, 5th Realm, 6th Realm, and 7th Realm. They were all killed by the sword. Only the 100-meter-tall statue was left. Anger. Shocking anger suddenly erupted from the 100-meter-tall statue. It came to life and suddenly rushed to the sky. Its huge claws covered the sky and the earth. The scales on the claws were clear, and each of them emitted a terrifying power. The divine power was so shocking that it could shatter mountains and split the earth. This attack directly surpassed the seventh realm and reached the half-saint level. You should just descend with your true body. Chunzong sneered. He didn't even draw his sword out of its scabbard. He just put his fingers together like a sword and drew out a shocking sword light. It was so sharp that it instantly split the 100-meter-tall statue's sharp claws and even its body. It was as easy as cutting tofu. Anger, fury, a terrifying voice suddenly resounded in the heavens and the earth. A vast divine power suddenly erupted and descended. It was as if an ancient divine mountain had appeared in the sky and was pressing down. Unfortunately, such a tyrannical divine power that had surpassed the half-step sage realm was still no threat to Chunzong. The eagle-headed god-fiend's true body had descended. Thanks to the development of faith, it had accumulated a lot over the past 10 years. It was enough to allow it to travel from the inner universe to the outer universe and descend with its true body. Moreover, it wouldn't be oppressed by the will of the outer universe for a certain period of time. He would be able to unleash his full strength. It was an eagle-headed, human-bodied god-fiend that seemed to be cast in black gold. It wasn't 100 meters tall, only about 3 meters tall. However, the power exuded from this 3-meter-tall body was many times stronger than that of the 100-meter-tall statue. The difference couldn't be described with words. Orthodox god level. A smile suddenly appeared on Zong's lips. With such strength, he dared to descend with his true body in front of him. However, the other party didn't know this. After all, there were very few great saints in the outer universe. It wasn't that easy to encounter one. The outer universe isn't a place for god-fiends like you to come. If you come, you'll die. Chunzong's voice contained unparalleled sword power. It was vast and mighty like divine thunder splitting heaven and earth. The heavenly will sword was unsheathed in an instant. An endless sword power erupted. The eagle-headed god-fiend's expression changed drastically. This was a great sword saint, equivalent to a great sword saint at the spiritual god level. It was only at the orthodox god level. How unlucky. It had kicked an iron plate. Run. No matter what, it had to escape. It had to give up this place and return to the god-fiend realm. Although escaping was tantamount to giving up, it was still better than being killed. There was only hope if it was alive. But since it was here, how could Chunzong let this god-fiend escape? Sword power suppression. The terrifying sword power of a great sword saint came crashing down in an instant, directly hitting the god-fiend. The huge difference in strength caused the god-fiend's body to freeze. This pause was the difference between life and death. The heavenly will sword suddenly slashed out, drawing an extremely condensed sword light. The sword light slashed through the god-fiend's body like it could split heaven and earth. It cut the god-fiend's body in two. It couldn't be blocked. It couldn't be blocked at all. This was a huge gap in strength. Back in the day, when Chunzong first encountered a god-fiend at the orthodox god level, he had to fight hard to kill it. But now, it was done with a single slash. After killing the god-fiend, he absorbed its divinity. Yunyanqin couldn't use it, so Chunzong kept it for the time being. Refining a god-fiend's divinity would only increase his cultivation base by a small amount. As for Yunyanqin, her cultivation base had reached the peak of the pristine saint realm. If she wanted to break through, she would have to comprehend it. Refining the divinity would be useless. After dealing with the Eagle God sect and killing the god-fiend, Chunzong brought Yunyanqin to the hinterland of Myriad Origin Island. That was the entrance to the Boulder Microcosm. However, the entrance to the Boulder Microcosm was closed, so it wasn't easy to open it. But this was nothing to Chunzong. With the help of his primal chaos heart force, Chunzong quickly found the node. Using his finger like a sword, he immediately tore a stable spatial crack and turned it into a door. "Let's go," Chunzong said to Yunyanqin. He took a step forward and entered the Boulder Microcosm with Yunyanqin. The Boulder Microcosm was a small world formed by a cosmic beast that resided in the Myriad Origin Island for a long time. A cosmic beast was at least at the Saint Realm. In the past, Chunzong had entered the Boulder Microcosm to fight for the control of this microcosm. In the end, He won it, and it belonged to the Trade Wind Tower. Although it belonged to the Trade Wind Tower, it also belonged to the Myriad Origin Island. After all, the Trade Wind Tower didn't monopolize it, but shared it. Of course, the control was still in the hands of the Trade Wind Tower's master. In the end, they were able to preserve some of their strength and enter this microcosm to hide. However, this hiding was only temporary. They didn't know when the Eagle God sect would find a way to enter this microcosm. When that time came, they would fight with their lives on the line. After entering the Boulder microcosm with Union Sheen, Chunzong immediately felt oppressed. An invisible will oppressed him and Union Sheen. Chunzong and Union Sheen had no choice but to restrain all of their strength. This microcosm wasn't strong. Its endurance couldn't exceed that of a half-saint. In the end, it was only a small world. Chunzong and Union Sheen were both at the Saint realm, and powerful ones at that. Once they released their aura, this microcosm would become unstable. A single strike would be enough to destroy this microcosm. As soon as they entered the microcosm, Chunzong didn't release his mixed Yuan heart force. Instead, he used his powerful perception to sense the microcosm. This microcosm wasn't very big, at least for Chunzong. Soon, Chunzong sensed auras from all four directions. The auras were completely different. The aura from the east was vigorous, the aura from the west was sharp, the aura from the south was light, and the aura from the north was mixed. Chunzong immediately recognized that the aura from the east was the Yuanyuan Palace, the aura from the west was the Wanren Sect, the aura from the south was the Trade Wind Tower, and the aura from the north was the Rogue Cultivator Alliance. Soon, Chunzong arrived at the south. 10 years ago, dozens of Trade Wind Tower's disciples followed the Tower Master into the Boulder microcosm. It wasn't that they didn't want to bring more people, but that they didn't have enough time. Moreover, most of them died in battle. In the end, only a few dozen of them made it into the Boulder microcosm. This was the Trade Wind Tower's last hope. The Wanren Sect is too much. They actually snatched the treasure that I wanted first. A Trade Wind Tower's disciple said angrily. This is already the 5th time. Do they want to start a war? Another Trade Wind Tower's disciple was also very angry. If I had known, I wouldn't have let the Wanren Sect's people in. The Wanren Sect and the Trade Wind Tower's conflict had been going on for a long time. In the beginning, it was just a competition. However, later on, Chunzong had a conflict with a disciple of the Sky Splitting Sword Palace's Sky Splitting Sword Palace. It was in this Boulder microcosm that Chunzong killed his opponent, causing the conflict to worsen. After that, several conflicts occurred, and quite a few people died. However, in the end, they all settled down. Even so, the conflict had already deepened. It was inevitable that it would be stirred up again for some reason, becoming a fuse. When they first entered the Boulder microcosm, everyone had come to take refuge and live their own lives. However, as time passed, they gradually started to have other thoughts. Especially since this was only a microcosm. Its range was very limited, and its resources were also very limited. When they fled in a panic, the resources they brought with them were also very limited. They couldn't support their cultivation for a long time, so conflicts arose. Moreover, they couldn't leave, and faced with the pressure of the Eagle God sect invading their microcosm, the pressure in their hearts was even greater. It was difficult to vent, so some conflicts inevitably erupted. In the beginning, they would restrain themselves. However, as time passed, conflicts would inevitably increase. However, the Origin Palace and Wandering Cultivator Alliance only had a competitive relationship with the Trade Wind Tower. There was no hatred or conflict between them. However, the conflict between the 10,000 Fathoms sect and the Trade Wind Tower was rather deep. As of now, the 10,000 Fathoms sect had been ruthless many times. They had ambushed, robbed, and so on, causing the Trade Wind Tower to suffer significant losses. However, the Trade Wind Tower's master was heavily injured. Since entering the Boulder microcosm, he had been in seclusion to recover. The 10,000 Fathoms sect's master's injuries were relatively light, and he had already come out of seclusion. Once the 10,000 Fathoms sect's master came out of seclusion, the people of the 10,000 Fathoms sect seemed to have gained a backer. They became even more rampant. In the conflicts, the trade wind tower would often be at a disadvantage. Although no one died, there were still people from the trade wind tower who were injured and robbed of their resources. On one side, they had to recover from their injuries, and on the other, they didn't have the resources to cultivate properly. The situation was very bad. The Origin Palace and Wandering Cultivator Alliance didn't plan to interfere. They chose to observe. If the situation continued like this, the Trade Wind Tower's master would be in danger if he still didn't show up. It was very likely that the 10,000 Fathoms sect would take this opportunity to devour them. At that time, even the Trade Wind Tower's master, who was still in seclusion, might be in danger. Chapter 31:15. Within Boulder Small World, there were still dozens of people from the Trade Wind Tower residing in the south. The Trade Wind Tower master was severely injured. Since he entered Boulder Small World 10 years ago, he had been in closed-door cultivation to heal his injuries. No one knew how he was doing. Many powerful and ferocious auras rapidly approached from afar, alarming the Trade Wind Tower's people. It's the 10,000 Fish sect. There are so many people. What do they want? The Trade Wind Tower's people moved. Their expressions changed greatly, becoming very grave. The 10,000 Fish sect and the Trade Wind Tower had clashed many times. Now that so many people from the 10,000 Fish sect had come, it was definitely not a good thing. They could not help but feel nervous. Soon, dozens of figures appeared and closed in. They all had ferocious gazes. With one look, one could tell that they were up to no good. This is my Trade Wind Tower's territory. What are you doing here? The only remaining Realm 6 Elder of the Trade Wind Tower had white hair. He shouted in a deep voice with a shocking aura. Back when they entered Boulder Small World, the four factions split up and agreed not to cross the boundary. This was to avoid unnecessary conflicts. However, they could not win against the will of the people. As time passed, some things would always quietly change. A Realm 6 Elder of the 10,000 Fish sect walked out with a smile. It's nothing. Our 10,000 Fish sect master came out of closed-door cultivation and learned that the Trade Wind Tower master had not come out yet. He probably has not recovered from his injuries, so he specially asked us to send a bottle of healing medicinal pills. Hand over the medicinal pills, the elders said directly. That won't do. Our sect master specially instructed us to personally deliver them to the Trade Wind Tower master. The 10,000 Fish sect elder chuckled and narrowed his eyes. A cold light flowed in his eyes. There was even some mockery in his eyes. Could it be that your Trade Wind Tower master's injuries are that severe? Rather than calling it a medicinal pill, it was more of a test. They wanted to see how severe the Trade Wind Tower master's injuries were. If the Trade Wind Tower master's injuries were really severe, the 10,000 Fish sect might take action later. For a time, there was a stalemate. Almost all of the 10,000 Fish sect had moved out. They had not come with good intentions. Accept the medicinal pills. Thank sect master Wanren for me. A voice suddenly rang out, as if it was carried by the wind. It was soft, but it clearly entered everyone's ears. It was the voice of the Integrity Wind House's master. Although the house master of the Trade Wind did not appear, since he had spoken, no matter how unwilling the elders of the 10,000 Walls sect were, they could not directly refuse. Who knew how serious the house master of the Trade Wind's injuries were? If he was almost fully recovered, then he wouldn't be inferior to sect head Wanren. At that instant, as the look in his eyes changed, the 10,000 Walls sect elder still handed over the bottle of medicinal cores, because he could not figure out the Tower Master's current situation. Once he put down the medicinal cores, he immediately bid farewell and returned. Not long after, a tyrannical and sharp aura suddenly erupted. It flew over from afar at an extremely fast speed. In just a short while, it arrived at the Trade Wind Tower. That figure stood in the air like a heavenly saber. The saber might he exuded was tyrannical and direct, covering the sky and earth and suppressing all directions. Originally, the Boulder Minor world couldn't withstand too much power. However, after hundreds of years of evolution and the conscious strengthening of the major forces on Myriad Origin Island, it was now able to withstand the impact of the Seventh Realm. Otherwise, in the past, the 7th and 6th realms wouldn't be able to hide in this minor world. Otherwise, the minor world would collapse. Sect Head Wanren. This person was Sect Head Wanren. At that time, his injuries were relatively light. After 10 years of seclusion to heal his injuries, he had almost fully recovered. The remaining small portion couldn't be healed by seclusion. He could completely recover slowly, so the impact wasn't great. After the elders of the 10,000 Walls sect returned and explained the situation, Sect Head Wanren made a judgment and immediately moved over. Tyrannical saber will swept across the sky like a heavenly saber hanging in the air, slashing towards the trade wind tower. The expressions of the trade wind tower's people changed drastically. That saber pressure was too strong and unbearable. Sect Head Wanren didn't say anything. He just stood in the air like that. He only exuded his saber will and saber pressure, but it suppressed the trade wind tower's people. He was forcing the trade wind tower's master to come out. From the words of the elders of the 10,000 Walls sect, Sect Head Wanren deduced that the trade wind tower's injuries weren't light. They were definitely much more serious than his, which was why he hadn't come out of seclusion just now. This was, without a doubt, an excellent opportunity. Sect Head Wanren, what is the meaning of this? The trade wind tower's master's voice sounded, drifting over with the wind. It's nothing. I'm just here to show my concern for your injuries. Sect Head Wanren's voice suddenly sounded. That voice was like the vibration of a saber. It didn't sound like he was here to show concern. Instead, it sounded like he was here to cause trouble. It's more or less done. Thank you for your concern, the trade wind tower's master replied without showing himself. Is that so? The instant Sect Head Wanren's voice sounded, his saber will suddenly burst forth. He raised his palm like a saber and suddenly chopped down. A several dozen meter long saber light immediately cut through the air, creating a pitch-black crack in the small world of boulders. The crack directly extended for several hundred meters. It was a ghastly sight as it chopped down. A loud boom suddenly rang out, and a pavilion was directly split apart, turning into ashes. A crack that was hundreds of meters long appeared on the ground, and it quickly spread out. This saber strike was very sudden. Although it didn't kill anyone, it still affected the trade wind tower's people, injuring them more or less. What are you doing? A figure suddenly soared into the sky, and a violent wind suddenly swept up between the heavens and the earth. It was the trade wind tower's master who had come out of his seclusion. He stared angrily at Sect Head Wanren, and the aura surrounding him was extremely violent, as if a hurricane was going to destroy everything. I'm sorry. This time, I had some progress in my seclusion to heal my injuries. Just now, I was attracted by the trade wind tower's aura and unconsciously used that saber strike. Although Sect Head Wanren was explaining, his tone was very casual. His eyes also became sharper. However, it seems that your injuries have not recovered yet. I wonder how many strikes you can take from me. As soon as he said that, an endless murderous aura filled the area. It was extremely terrifying. Sect Head Wanren's intention was very clear. He wanted to deal with the trade wind tower's master. This was because he had already seen that the trade wind tower's master was strong on the outside, but weak on the inside. The trade wind tower's master's injuries were too serious. He probably hadn't even recovered half of his strength, while Sect Head Wanren himself had recovered 80 to 90% of his strength. The two of their strengths were originally about the same. One of them had recovered 90% of his strength, while the other had not even recovered 50%. It was obvious who was stronger and who was weaker. This was undoubtedly a good opportunity. It was a good opportunity to get rid of the Trade Wind Tower before the Yuanyuan Palace and the Rogue Cultivator Alliance reacted. Moreover, the Alliance Master of the Rogue Cultivator Alliance was the strongest. However, his injuries would not be any worse than the Trade Wind Tower's masters. He was probably also in seclusion now. He would not be able to stop Sect Head Wanren. The Trade Wind Tower's master's expression became increasingly grave. His face turned pale, and he fell silent. He knew that his injuries were very serious. After 10 years, he had only recovered 30 to 40% of his strength. The main reason was that he lacked resources. He could only recover bit by bit. However, it was obvious that Sect Head Wan Ren's injuries were almost healed. Otherwise, he would not have come looking for Sect Head Wan Ren so directly. How about it? It was just a fight to the death. I wonder if you can take one strike from me. Just as the Trade Wind Tower was determined to fight with his life on the line, and Sect Head Wan Ren's saber essence continued to gather, and the saber light soared into the sky, a calm voice suddenly rang out. That voice was as clear as the flowing water of a clear spring. It was also as high and distant as the supreme stars. However, it was extremely clear and entered everyone's ears. This voice sounded a little familiar. It was as if they had heard it somewhere before. However, it also seemed like an illusion. It was as if they had seen something and suddenly felt that it was familiar. However, they had never seen it before. The Trade Wind Tower's master's eyes fluctuated. He seemed to have thought of something and suddenly became excited. However, he did not dare to think further. Sect Head Wan Ren frowned slightly. Suddenly, a ferocious aura burst out. It was mixed with the tyrannical saber essence and soared into the sky. It was as if it was going to break the sky of the small world. Who dared to speak to him in such a manner? If it was not the Alliance Master of the Rogue Cultivator Alliance or Palace Master Yun, then who was it? He was well aware of the number of people who had entered the small world of boulders. His eyes carried an extremely terrifying, ferocious aura. As light shot out in all directions, it was as if he wanted to tear everything apart. Under the gaze of his extremely ruthless eyes, two figures suddenly appeared beside the House Master of the Integrity Wind. It was a man and a woman. They both looked very young, especially the man. His face gave off a somewhat familiar feeling, as if he had seen him somewhere before. The Trade Wind Tower's master stared blankly at Shenzong. He felt as if he was dreaming. It was as if he had appeared in an illusion. It was unbelievable. Sect Head Wan Ren, try and take my sword. When Shenzong arrived, he had sensed everything that had happened. Immediately, a faintly discernible cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He did not even draw his sword. Instead, he used his fingers like a sword and gently pointed forward. The sword finger was light and slow. The trajectory was clear as if it did not contain any power. However, Sect Head Wan Ren's expression changed drastically. He roared and immediately drew his sword. All of his strength was channeled into the long sword. The sword trembled and let out a shocking sword chime. It shook the entire area. Sword will filled the air and shattered the void. In an instant, a sword light that was a few hundred meters long was released. It directly split the sky open, creating a pitch-black crack that was 1,000 meters long. Even the ground was slashed with a long mark under the pressure of the sword. This sword was extremely terrifying. Even the small world of boulders started to tremble. It was as if it was going to collapse because of this. Although the small world of boulders could already withstand the power of the seventh realm, Sect Head Wan Ren's sword was still extremely terrifying. It surpassed the power of an ordinary seventh realm. Faced with this sword, Shenzong's expression did not change. He continued to stab with his sword finger and directly destroyed the terrifying sword light. Then, it pierced through everything and pierced through the space between Sect Head Wan Ren's eyebrows. Killed. Killed with one sword. No, he did not even draw his sword. He killed Sect Head Wan Ren so easily with his finger in place of sword. This scene was out of everyone's expectations. It also caused the expressions of the elders and disciples of Sect Head Wan Ren who were rushing over to change drastically. They all looked dazed and did not move at all. It was as if they had been petrified. At that moment, it was as if even the wind had stopped and solidified. It was silent. Tower Master, we haven't seen each other for many years. Don't you recognize me? Shenzong looked at the stunned Trade Wind Tower's master and revealed a smile that he had not seen in a long time. Chapter 31:16. Coming. I have something to do this morning. 10,000 Origin Island began to become lively again. This was because the last forces of the Trade Wind Tower, the Palace of Origin, and the Rogue Cultivator Alliance came out of Boulder Small World and rebuilt on the original ruins. As for the 10,000 Ren sect, it was directly removed. The 10,000 Rin sect no longer existed on 10,000 Origin Island. As for the Trade Wind Tower's master's injury, it was naturally not difficult for Chun Zong, and he recovered quickly. The Trade Wind Tower, the Palace of Origin, and the Rogue Cultivator Alliance completely united and formed the 10,000 Origin Alliance. Chun Zong was elected as the alliance leader. The Trade Wind Tower, the Palace of Origin, and the original alliance leader of the Rogue Cultivator Alliance were the elders. The Sixth Realm powerhouses were the elders of the 10,000 Origin Alliance. In order to prevent the God Worship sect, the Purgatory Demon sect, and the Infernal Order from attacking, the Boulder Small World was further strengthened. There is also a backup plan that could be used to enter the 10,000 Origin Island from a certain place in the 10,000 Origin Alliance before entering the Boulder Small World. This way, they could survive if they encountered an invincible enemy. In addition, outside the Boulder Small World and the 10,000 Origin Alliance, there were also formations left by Chun Zong that could withstand the attack of a pristine Saint Stage powerhouse for a short period of time. This period of time was enough for them to safely evacuate. Of course, if a great Saint Stage powerhouse attacked, no one would be able to escape. After making these arrangements, Chun Zong left behind a few sword techniques in the 10,000 Origin Alliance. These sword techniques were nothing to Chun Zong, but to the 10,000 Origin Alliance, they could be used as secret manuals. After leaving, he quickly brought Yun Yinxin to the Nine Heavens Imperial Court. The Nine Heavens Imperial Court was Chun Zong's starting point in the outer universe. Starting from the Nine Heavens Imperial Court, Chun Zong entered the Trade Wind Tower and then Mount Taihao, progressing step by step and becoming stronger until his current strength was astonishing. In the Nine Heavens Imperial Court, there were his master, senior sisters, and so on. The Nine Heavens Imperial Court was located in the Heaven Continent. It was the strongest force in the Heaven Continent and was also the actual ruler of the Heaven Continent. Although the Heaven Continent was called a continent, it actually had many islands and continents. They were like floating islands surrounding the largest island. There were hundreds of such islands. Some of the islands had rich and pure vitality, which was why cultivators had established their own forces. However, there were also islands where the vitality was thin and few people went there. Even birds and beasts did not live there. At this moment, on a very remote and desolate island, there were many caves. They were the caves of some ancient beasts, but after so many years, those beasts had already gone extinct. Immediately, a figure circled around a few times like a flowing light before swiftly entering an extremely ordinary and hidden underground cave. His presence was extremely faint as he continuously followed the tunnel and made many twists and turns. He swiftly headed underground and directly entered a depth of several hundred meters. This passageway was also crisscrossed like a maze. If one was not familiar with it or lacked guidance, it would be very easy to get lost. However, this figure seemed to be very familiar with the path. He headed straight for the correct path and finally arrived at the destination. It was an underground cave that was almost 1,000 meters deep. In the depths of this cave, there were a few other figures. "You're back, eldest senior brother." The three figures stood up one after another to welcome the person who had entered from the surface. One of them was Yu Wuxia. "Eldest senior brother, how's the situation outside?" Yu Wuxia immediately asked. The person who was addressed as eldest senior brother, if Chun Zong was here, he would be surprised to find that it was the eldest disciple of Master One-Hearted Dao Master, Luo Beichuan, who was originally known as the Northern Dao Heavenly Wolf in the Void. After a few years, 100 years, Luo Beichuan had actually entered the Void. The aura he exuded was not weak at all. He had obviously reached the 5th level. The people of the Infernal Order are on the move everywhere. Those who do not surrender will be exterminated. Luo Beichuan let out a long sigh. "It's not safe for us to hide here. The people of the Infernal Order may find us at any time." Luo Beichuan's words instantly silenced Yu Wuxia and the other two. Now, Master was injured and was recuperating. His strength was still there, but he could not fully unleash it. Eldest senior brother Luo Beichuan was at the peak of the 5th level. He himself was also at the 5th level. His two junior brothers and junior sisters were slightly weaker, only at the 3rd level. With such a lineup, if they encountered the people of the Infernal Order, even if they could kill some of them, they would not be able to escape death in the end unless they surrendered. It was impossible for them to surrender. They would never learn how to surrender in their entire lives. This was precisely because of their unyielding character. However, they also did not want to die. It was precisely because of this that they hid everywhere and fled to this desolate island to hide. However, by doing so, they were only delaying the time of death. The people of the Infernal Order would find this place sooner or later. On Heaven Continent, in a certain open space near the 9 Heavens Imperial Court, a crack suddenly appeared and turned into a door. Then 2 figures stepped out. It was as if they were taking a leisurely stroll. "Who's there? Capture them!" A shout suddenly sounded and a murderous aura swept over. A few black-robed figures burst out at an astonishing speed and rushed toward Chunzong and Yunyinshin like a gust of wind. Their speed was indeed very fast, but to Chunzong and Yunyinshin it was very slow. They did not move their bodies and did not even raise their arms. They only released a bit of sword power, and these black-robed figures directly froze in the void, not moving at all. This aura, Chunzong frowned slightly. His eyes fell on these black-robed figures and felt that they were very familiar. Infernal Order. These black-robed figures were members of the Infernal Order. Had the infernal demonic sword already infiltrated here? Heaven Continent, where the 9 Heavens Imperial Court was located, was actually very inconspicuous in the outer universe and belonged to a relatively remote corner. However, after hundreds of years, it was still unavoidable that the Infernal Order would eventually target it. The Infernal Order and the Purgatory Demon sect revived and gradually revealed the powerful strength that they had accumulated for many years, trying to run rampant in the universe and invade everything. However, these 2 forces seemed to have a tacit understanding and did not target any place at the same time. In other words, where there was the Purgatory Demon sect, there would definitely be no Infernal Order, and where there was the Infernal Order, there would be no Purgatory Demon sect. This directly avoided the confrontation and conflict between the 2 major forces of the evil Tao. This disappointed those who originally hoped that the 2 forces would clash. If the 2 major forces of the evil Tao were to clash, it would be equivalent to internal strife. At that time, the threat to the other forces would be sharply reduced. Unfortunately, the Purgatory Demon sect and the Infernal Order were very clear about this. Next, Chunzong naturally interrogated them for information. Soon, Chunzong and Yunyinshin both knew what had happened. It turned out that 10 years ago, when the Infernal Order descended on this universe, they first demanded that the major forces surrender and that those who did not surrender would be exterminated. The 9 Heavens Imperial Court did not surrender, but chose to resist and fight to the death. At first, the Infernal Order was not strong enough and was even beaten back. However, after mobilizing powerhouses as reinforcements, the 9 Heavens Imperial Court's resistance was directly crushed. The founder of the 9 Heavens Imperial Court was a 7th realm Emperor-level powerhouse. However, he had left for many years and never returned. Now, the strongest powerhouse in the 9 Heavens Imperial Court was a 6th realm, peak-level, Emperor-level powerhouse. In the face of a 7th realm powerhouse, they were powerless to resist. In the end, the 9 Heavens Imperial Court was destroyed. However, there were still some 6th realm powerhouses who escaped alone or with a few disciples. They scattered everywhere, but they were still constantly pursued, found, and killed. Chunzong asked many people he knew, but basically all of them were dead. The ones he was most concerned about were his master and senior sister. Unfortunately, there was no information about his senior sister. However, there was information about his master, because his master had already become one of the higher-ups of the 9 Heavens Imperial Court's Tao Alliance and was designated as the candidate for the Alliance leader. He was also known as the One-Heart Tao Emperor. This meant that his master had already broken through to the 6th realm and become an Emperor-level powerhouse. This was a good thing. However, under the invasion of the Infernal Order, it was not a good thing either. However, there was still no news of his master's death. Perhaps he was still alive. Holding on to a bit of hope, Chunzong casually crushed the members of the Seamless Demon cult, then immediately charged into the sky with Union Shin. He sent out his Chaos Origin Heart Force to cover the entire area, quickly searching for the Seamless Demon cult. They would search in Heaven Continent first. If they could not find him, then they would leave Heaven Continent and search in other continents. As long as he was still alive, they could always find him. As he searched, Chunzong frowned. The situation had obviously changed greatly compared to before. It was even more dangerous. The Purgatory Demon Sect and the Infernal Order were becoming more and more rampant. Not only that, but they were also becoming more and more powerful. They had destroyed several holy lands one after another. If he had not returned in time, he was afraid that Taihao Mountain would not have been able to hold on and would have been destroyed. The 10,000 Origin Island was destroyed because of the Cult of Gods. Now, the Nine Heavens Imperial Court was destroyed because of the Infernal Order. The Purgatory Demon Sect, the Infernal Order, and the Cult of Gods. These were the three major malignant tumors of the outer universe. It seemed that he should do his part for the outer universe and eradicate these three malignant tumors as much as possible. The Mixed Elements Heart Force was unfathomable and mysterious. However, it was silent, like the spring wind and rain, silently covering everything. The aura of the One Heart Sutra. Chunzong was instantly delighted. With Chunzong's current cultivation, once the Mixed Elements Heart Force was fully released, it could directly cover the entire Heaven Continent. However, it would take some time to spread. After searching continuously, Chunzong finally found the remnant aura of the One Heart Sutra on a deserted and remote island. It was very subtle. If Chunzong had not deduced the One Heart Sutra to an unprecedented level and condensed the Mixed Element Heart Force, he would not have been able to detect it. Let's go. Carrying Union Shin, Chunzong once again tore through the void. In just an instant, he had crossed a great distance and directly arrived at the deserted island. Since there was the remnant aura of the One Heart Sutra here, although it was not very strong, it meant that someone who cultivated the One Heart Sutra had stayed here. The One Heart Sutra was a unique inheritance of the One Heart Palace. It was very difficult to learn and even more difficult to understand. The remnant aura of the One Heart Sutra here was definitely not at the beginner level, but at a deeper level. Apart from his master and third senior sister Yuwusha, who else could have mastered such a profound One Heart Sutra? Therefore, Chunzong deduced that the remnant aura of the One Heart Sutra here should be related to third senior sister or his master. Chapter 31:17. Heaven Continent, in a desolate and remote island, in an underground cave that was 1,000 meters deep. Yuwusha circled around Chunzong, looking left and right as if she couldn't believe her eyes. "Are you really fifth junior brother?" Yuwusha mumbled as she planned to examine Chunzong thoroughly. "It's me, third senior sister." Chunzong smiled helplessly. His third senior sister had left a deep impression on him the first time they met. She was such a violent woman. Immediately, Chunzong looked at the upright figure with an iron-blooded aura and said, "Eldest senior brother, fifth junior brother." A sincere smile appeared on Luo Beichuan's cold face. Luo Beichuan was very grateful to Chunzong. Back then, with Chunzong's guidance, Luo Beichuan finally grasped the opportunity to break through from the third realm to the fourth realm. After that, Luo Beichuan improved by leaps and bounds, constantly rising from the fourth realm to the peak. Finally, in the void, he broke through the fourth realm to the fifth realm and became a sovereign realm master. However, Luo Beichuan was very reluctant because he knew of the existence of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court and that there were higher levels in the path of cultivation. In the universe, the fifth realm was just barely enough to enter the ranks of masters. As a talented individual who was also known as the youngest dominator in the void, he had higher aspirations. If he didn't know about the existence of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court in the universe, it would have been fine. However, now that he knew about it, it was like an indescribable temptation that constantly attracted him. He thought of all kinds of methods and tried all kinds of methods but failed again and again. By chance, Luo Beichuan chose the last step, which was to step into the universe. Stepping into the universe at the fifth realm of the void would cause him to be suppressed by the universe. Luo Beichuan was very decisive and directly abolished his cultivation and started cultivating again. With such decisiveness, Luo Beichuan's talent was indeed outstanding. He succeeded in changing his cultivation and improved by leaps and bounds. In just 100 or 200 years, he cultivated to the fourth realm and even reached the peak of the fourth realm. Under the invasion of the Infernal Order and facing a life and death crisis, his potential exploded and he broke through to the fifth realm. It had to be said that Luo Beichuan's talent was indeed amazing. Of course, in addition to his talent, there was also his very decisive nature. It was not easy to cultivate to the fifth realm. Many people cultivated for hundreds or thousands of years and still couldn't break through to the fifth realm. However, Luo Beichuan had been crippled as soon as he said so. He had changed his cultivation as soon as he said so. There had not been a single moment of delay, but he had still succeeded. Although he had suffered quite a bit and experienced quite a few setbacks during this period, he had still succeeded. In the entire Nine Heavens Imperial Court, the fifth realm strength was considered to be at the level of a master. Of course, in the entire universe, the fifth realm was just barely stepping into the ranks of a master and barely having the qualifications to roam the universe. Only when one broke through to the sixth realm could one truly be called a master of the universe. In any case, Luo Beichuan's arrival in the universe and his cultivation to the fifth realm was an excellent start. If it wasn't for the invasion of the Infernal Order, there was a great possibility that he could break through to the sixth realm if he continued to cultivate steadily. Chunzong was happy for Luo Beichuan. This was the eldest senior brother of the One-Hearted Palace. The other two, a man and a woman, both looked very young. In fact, they were also very young. They were not even 100 years old, not even 50 years old. Their cultivation was only at the third realm. The young man and woman were sizing up Chunzong with curious gazes. Fifth junior brother, let me introduce you. Noticing their gazes, Yu Wuxia immediately smiled at Chunzong. He said, "This is Qingying, and this is Tianchu." Qingying and Tianchu are both disciples that Master has accepted in the past few decades. Qingying is the sixth junior sister, and Tianchu is the seventh junior brother. Qingying, Tianchu, this is Master's fifth disciple, your fifth senior brother Chunzong, Yu Wuxia said to the young man and woman. Greetings, fifth senior brother. Qingying and Tianchu hurriedly bowed to Chunzong. They were actually very curious about this fifth senior brother. After being accepted as a disciple by the One-Hearted Tao Emperor, they also entered the Nine Heavens Imperial Court and heard about the legends left behind by Chunzong. First, he rose to prominence in the Nine Heavens Imperial Court as a nobody. Then, he entered a stronger force than the Nine Heavens Imperial Court, the Trade Wind Tower. Then, he entered the sacred land of the Sword Path, Taihao Mountain, to cultivate. He even ranked first on the 3 lists of the universe and became famous throughout the universe. His achievements were extremely shocking. A legend. He was a legend. When they found out about it, their reverence was like an endless torrent of water. They were very much looking forward to the day when they could see this legendary fifth senior brother of theirs with their own eyes. What they did not expect was that they would meet him under such circumstances. But no matter what the circumstances were, it was a great honor to be able to meet this legendary fifth senior brother. Yunyan Xin was also once from the Nine Heavens Imperial Court. Now, she was Chunzong's Tao companion and was respected as their senior sister. As their senior brother, it was his first time meeting his junior sister and junior brother. Naturally, he had to express his gratitude. Chunzong took out some things as a greeting gift. To Chunzong, these are just ordinary things. But to the 2 young people who were only in the third realm, they were precious treasures. Not to mention them, even Yu Wuxia, who had just entered the fifth realm, was shocked. But Chunzong was a great sword saint. With such great strength, the things he collected were naturally extraordinary. Although they were shocked, Qingying and Tianchu still accepted Chunzong's gift in the end. Perhaps sensing Chunzong's aura, the heart intent Tao Emperor, who was recuperating in seclusion, also came out of seclusion. Master! Chunzong and Yunyanxin immediately greeted him. Get up, get up. The heart intent Tao Emperor chuckled. He saw Chunzong again, the disciple he was most satisfied with so far. The joy in his heart was indescribable, and it directly overflowed on his face. Chunzong's powerful senses also sensed that the heart intent Tao Emperor's aura was a little chaotic. Obviously, his injuries had not healed, and they were not light. But this was nothing to Chunzong. He could casually take out the many healing pills in his storage divine tool, and they could treat such injuries. The injuries could not be delayed. Chunzong took out the most suitable healing pills and gave them to the heart intent Tao Emperor. The heart intent Tao Emperor immediately swallowed them. As he circulated his cultivation technique to dissolve the effects of the pills, he chatted with Chunzong. The heart intent sutra was so outstanding that he did not need to go into seclusion to refine pills. The reason why the heart intent Tao Emperor had gone into seclusion to recuperate was because his injuries were severe and he lacked the help of suitable pills. He could only go into seclusion without any interference, and the effects would be better. As the pills entered his mouth, he refined them continuously, releasing pure and gentle energy that filled the heart intent Tao Emperor's body, causing his injuries to gradually heal. Chunzong could acutely sense that the heart intent Tao Emperor's aura was rising and becoming more stable. His pale complexion also gradually improved. Chunzong, Qingying is a disciple I took in 40 years ago, and Tianchu is a disciple I took in 20 years ago. The heart intent Tao Emperor smiled. The heart intent sutra is difficult to learn and difficult to master. I've left behind many inheritances in our original space, but unfortunately, very few people have mastered it. Chunzong knew that the heart intent sutra was difficult to master. Otherwise, the heart intent palace would not only have a few people. He did not expect to find 2 people who could master the heart intent sutra in the outer universe. It was not bad, and the heart intent sutra could be passed down better. Chunzong suddenly thought of something. The outer universe was so vast, and it was unknown how many times bigger it was than the void. 1,000 voids could not compare to the outer universe. No, even 100,000 voids could not compare to the outer universe. There would also be more geniuses in the outer universe than in the void. Perhaps there would be more people who were suitable to cultivate the Heart Intent Sutra. In this way, the Heart Intent Sutra could be passed down better. Suddenly, the expression of Chunzong, who was chatting with the Heart Intent Tao Emperor, changed slightly. Master, someone's coming, Chunzong said. Who? The Heart Intent Tao Emperor's expression was stern. People from the Infernal Order, Chunzong said. What? The expressions of the Heart Intent Tao Emperor and the others changed drastically. They knew very well how terrifying the Infernal Order was. The Nine Heavens Imperial Court had been destroyed just like that. Many of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court's experts had also been killed by the Infernal Order's experts. It could be said to be a one-sided massacre. And that was only a small part of the Infernal Order's strength. The few of them were quite lucky, and they had been hiding all over the place. In the end, they had escaped and fled here. They planned to leave Heaven Continent and go further away. However, the Infernal Order was running rampant in this universe, so they could only hide here and did not dare to move at will. Only Luo Beichuan would go out to scout for information once in a while. Once the right time came, he would immediately leave this place. They did not expect the Infernal Order to come looking for them. Chunzong, take your senior brothers and sisters and leave. My injuries are almost healed. I'll hold them back, the Heart Intent Tao Emperor said solemnly. He had decided to sacrifice himself so that his disciples could have a chance to escape safely. Chunzong was the disciple he thought most highly of. The true inheritance of the One Heart Sutra would also fall on him. As for his eldest disciple, Luo Beichuan, he was indeed talented, but compared to Chunzong, there was still a clear gap. Master, If there's anything, I'll do it for you, Chunzong said with a smile. At this time, there was no need for his master to risk his life. The most powerful person from the Infernal Order was only at the 7th realm. What difference was there between a mere 7th realm and an ant in front of him? As soon as he finished speaking, Chunzong's figure flashed, and he immediately left the underground cave and appeared outside. He was so fast that the Heart Intent Dao Emperor could not react in time. Chunzong, 5th junior brother, 5th senior brother. The group of people were startled and immediately shouted, "Don't worry, Master. Those people from the Infernal Order are nothing to Chunzong," Yunyanxin said with a smile. Although Yunyanxin had not broken through to the Great Saint Realm, he was still at the peak of the pristine Saint Realm. His divine sense could easily cover the entire deserted island. Therefore, Yunyanxin could also sense the strength of those who came. The difference was too great. The 7th realm in the inner universe was only equivalent to the heaven realm, but Chunzong was a great sword saint who far surpassed the heaven realm. He was even a tyrannical existence who could fight ancient Phoenix Mountain's divine ancestor without retreating. Chapter 31:18. Normally, birds and beasts would fly away from this desolate and remote island. But in this chaotic situation where the seamless demon cult was invading, this island became the first choice for many people to avoid disaster. The members of the Infernal Order seemed to understand this as well. They searched the islands one by one. Whenever they found someone, they would either surrender or be killed. There was no third option. As for killing them, it was not impossible. The problem was that it was impossible. The Infernal Order was too powerful. Although only a small portion of them had come to Heaven Continent, there were several 7th-level cultivators and even more 5th-level cultivators. As for 5th-level cultivators, there was no need to mention them. There are also countless 4th-level cultivators. The strongest cultivators in Heaven Continent were the 6th-level cultivators. There were probably less than 10 of them in total. They were not even as strong as this small portion of the Infernal Order disciples. Now, a 7th-level cultivator had led 2 6th-level cultivators and 10 5th-level cultivators to search the deserted islands. They had even killed countless people who were unwilling to surrender. Now, they had finally arrived here. With just a few clues, this 7th-level Infernal Order elder was certain that someone was hiding here. According to normal circumstances, if Chunzong did not find them, then the result would be that one Heart Dao Emperor and the others would be captured alive or suppressed and killed. After all, the difference in strength was too great. It was so great that even if they wanted to escape, there was no hope. However, there were no ifs, because Chunzong had arrived. With a flash, Chunzong appeared on the surface from the 1,000-meter-deep underground cave. He appeared behind the group of Infernal Order elders and disciples. "Are you looking for someone?" A faint voice that seemed to contain a hint of mockery rang out, startling the Infernal Order elders. Even a 7th-level cultivator was shocked. He had actually appeared behind them so soundlessly. If he did not take the initiative to make a sound, they would not have noticed him at all. He instantly turned around. A terrifying aura exuded an evil and sinister aura. It spread out like a wildfire and locked onto Chunzong. When he saw Chunzong and saw how young Chunzong was and how his aura had locked onto him, the 7th-level Infernal Order elder immediately calmed down. Perhaps the other party was able to silently appear behind them due to some special means. "Who are you?" However, this 7th-level Infernal Order elder was still very cautious and immediately asked, "The people who will kill you." Chunzong's reply wasn't loud, but it was clearly heard by every member of the Infernal Order. They were instantly enraged, and the aura that was locked onto Chunzong instantly surged, pretending to be mysterious. "Since that's the case, let's just take him down and properly entertain him." The 7th Realm elder let out a cold snort, and his expression became cold. He waved his hand, and someone attacked. Chunzong's chi was hidden. Therefore, no one could determine Chunzong's cultivation level from his chi. However, he looked so young. At most, he was in the 5th level. Even if he was more outstanding, he would only be in the 6th level. Such a young 6th Realm cultivator would be considered a top prodigy in the entire universe. It was impossible for such a young sixth realm cultivator to appear in a remote place like Heaven Continent. However, the one who attacked was still a sixth realm cultivator. It was enough to take him seriously. Faced with the attack of the sixth realm disciple, Chunzong's expression didn't change. He just flicked his finger lightly, and an invisible chi shot out. It was impossible to dodge and instantly hit the sixth realm disciple, piercing through his forehead and shattering his soul. Instant kill. I'll take care of you first, then I'll uproot the infernal order and completely exterminate them. Chunzong's voice sounded. Although it was soft, it carried an indescribable killing intent and determination. No one doubted the determination contained in it. Although they felt that Chunzong was boasting, the fact that he killed a sixth realm disciple immediately caused the other infernal order disciples' expressions to change, especially the seventh level elder. Although he was a normal elder in the infernal order, he was still a seventh level cultivator after all. He could easily defeat and kill a sixth realm cultivator. However, he also felt that it wouldn't be that easy for him to kill a sixth realm cultivator. It wasn't possible for him to kill a sixth realm cultivator with just a flick of his finger. If he could do it, then he must be very, very strong among the seventh level cultivators. Explode. In an instant, this elder directly exploded. The other infernal order disciples also exploded. Dark aura spread out and covered the sky and earth in all directions, forming an existence similar to a precept domain. This was the shrunken version of the infernal order. It was very different from a real precept domain. However, for normal cultivators, there was no way to deal with it. Chunzong smiled slightly. It was just a small trick. His aura leaked out and instantly wreaked havoc like a thunderstorm. It rushed in all directions and set off a monstrous sword aura that broke through everything. It was as if it could shatter the vacuum and shatter the nine heavens. The shrunken version of the infernal order didn't even last for 1/100th of a second before it was shattered by Chunzong's monstrous sword aura. It didn't have the slightest ability to resist. These infernal order disciples also couldn't move under Chunzong's monstrous sword aura. Solidification. The space around them seemed to have been frozen. They couldn't move at all. The disciples of the infernal order were like mosquitoes that were frozen in a spider's web. They couldn't even struggle. They could only open their eyes, filled with fear and uneasiness. Especially the seventh realm elder. With his powerful strength, he could clearly feel that he couldn't move at all. What kind of powerhouse was this? Could it be a saint-level powerhouse? Otherwise, even a saint-level powerhouse wouldn't be able to make him like this, right? The panic in his heart couldn't be described with words. He wanted to speak, but he couldn't open his mouth. It was as if his mouth was glued tightly. Die. Chunzong only said one word softly. It was as if his words were the law. The shocking sword aura also exploded in an instant. It turned into invisible sharp swords that hung in the air. It was as if a heavenly sword had crashed down from the sky and directly blasted towards the members of the infernal order. The sword aura was formless and soundless. It couldn't cause any damage to the body, but it would directly damage the soul. Chunzong was a great sword saint. His sword aura was at the level of a great sword saint. Against a group of people who were at most at the seventh realm, the difference between them was like that of ants. It was immeasurable. Under the impact of the shocking sword aura, the souls of these people, including the seventh realm elder, were directly torn apart and destroyed. Their vision instantly turned black, and they directly fell into a bottomless abyss, sinking forever. They were dead. Their souls and wills were completely crushed, and their souls were scattered, leaving behind only empty shells. After the sword aura dispersed, the frozen space around them also returned to normal. Their bodies immediately collapsed to the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust. Powerful auras erupted, and they charged out of the underground cavern. It was Master, the one-hearted Tao Emperor, eldest senior brother, and third senior sister. Even the third realm, sixth junior sister, and seventh junior brother had charged out fearlessly. However, when the one-heart Tao Emperor and the others appeared on the surface, they only saw a single person standing in midair. Wasn't that their disciples, junior brothers, senior brothers? Were the people from the infernal order? Didn't they come? Or did they already leave? Then, they also saw the motionless black-robed figures on the ground. There was still a faint aura left on them. Wasn't that the aura of the infernal order? These were the people from the infernal order. They're all dead? Shenzong this. The heart Tao Emperor opened his mouth, but his mind was in a mess. He didn't know how to ask. Don't worry, Master. These people are already dead, Shenzong directly replied. This directly made the heart Tao Emperor and the others breathe a sigh of relief. Let's go. Leave this place immediately. The heart Tao Emperor had just breathed a sigh of relief, but he immediately became tense again. He quickly said, the other people from the infernal order will quickly know about these people's deaths. If they rush over quickly, it'll be extremely disadvantageous for us. Don't worry, Master. Even if a saint from the infernal order comes, there's no need to avoid them, Shenzong said with a slight smile. His calm voice contained an incomparable might, and it directly dispersed the panic that rose in everyone's hearts. We're not afraid of saints. The heart Tao Emperor and the others' expressions changed drastically. They revealed a very complicated expression. Saint. If it was in the past, when they hadn't entered the universe or just entered the universe not long ago, they wouldn't have any concept of this word. However, now they were clear about the division of the path of cultivation. The ruler of the void was only at the 5th level in the universe. In the universe, the 5th level could barely be considered a powerhouse. It was only equivalent to stepping through the threshold of powerhouses. They barely had the qualifications to roam the universe. Only by breaking through to the 6th level, which was above the 5th level, and becoming an emperor could one be considered a true powerhouse. Only then would one truly have the qualifications to roam the universe and not die so easily. Above the 6th level, there was the 7th level. Above the 7th level, there was the half-saint level. It was an existence that was stronger than the 7th level. How strong was it? It wasn't clear because they didn't even have a direct idea of the strength of the 7th level. They only knew that it was very easy for a 7th level to defeat a 6th level. It was also very easy for a half-saint to defeat a 7th level. As for above the half-saint level, it was the saint level. It was said that the saint level was a terrifying level that far surpassed the half-saint level. There were very few saints in the entire universe. Each of them was a super existence that oversaw a holy land. A holy land. The 9 Heavens Imperial Court was very strong, at least in their eyes. However, the strongest was only at the 6th level. There wasn't even a 7th level. In the entire 9 Heavens universe, there wasn't a 7th level either. In a holy land, it was said that the 6th level was very common. There were also a lot of 7th level. There were also many half-saints, and there were even saint-level powerhouses guarding. However, Shenzong said that even if a saint from the infernal order came, there was no need to avoid them. What did this mean? Did it mean that his disciple wasn't afraid of saints? What did it mean to not be afraid of saints? It meant that the other party was also a super existence of the saint level. Could it be that his disciple was actually a saint-level powerhouse? It was impossible. How old was his disciple? It was said that every saint-level powerhouse was an old monster that had lived for tens of thousands of years. How could he become a saint-level in a few hundred years? I'm a saint-level. As if sensing the doubts in everyone's eyes, Shenzong directly responded. Chapter 31:19. I'm a saint-level. Nianxin is also a saint-level. For a moment, the single-hearted Tao Emperor and the others were in a daze. Their eyes were numb, and the words just now seemed to be echoing in their ears. Their hearts were in turmoil. Saint-level. His disciple, junior brother, and senior brother turned out to be a saint-level expert. To them, saint-level experts only existed in legends. Not only that, but even his Tao companion, Nianxin, was also a saint-level expert. Saint-level experts were high and mighty. To them, they were legendary existences. Now, there were 2 living saint-level experts in front of them, and they were so close. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Shenzong and Nianxin looked at each other and smiled. They didn't disturb them and let them be immersed in their shock. With them around, there wouldn't be any danger. Even if a saint-level expert attacked, he wouldn't be able to hurt them at all. Not to mention Yinxin's super strength at the peak of the pristine saint level. There was also Chunzong, a super great sword saint who could fight a divine ancestor with his full strength. Even if a divine ancestor attacked, he would be blocked. Moreover, it was still unknown whether there was a divine ancestor in the outer universe. After a while, the single-hearted Tao Emperor was the first to completely wake up. Even so, he still couldn't calm down. The way he looked at Chunzong was different. That was a saint-level expert. However, the single-hearted Tao Emperor didn't show any reverence. First, he was Chunzong's master. Second, the Heart Sutra was indeed very powerful. It could strengthen the mind and strengthen one's divine decree. Who would believe that my disciple is a saint-level expert? The single-hearted Tao Emperor laughed in the end. Luo Beichuan and the others also woke up. However, their cultivation of the Heart Sutra wasn't as profound as the single-hearted Tao Emperor's. Therefore, deep in their hearts, there was still a kind of reverence, especially for Qing, Ying, and Tian Chu. Eldest senior brother, third senior sister, I'm still your fifth junior brother. Chunzong immediately smiled. His sincere tone startled Luo Beichuan and Yu Wuxiao for a moment, but they soon smiled. It was still the fifth junior brother they knew. As for Qing, Ying, and Tian Chu, this was also the first time the two of them had met Chunzong. Moreover, they were only at the third realm, so they instinctively felt reverence for him. It was inevitable, and Chunzong could do nothing about it. I almost didn't dare to talk to you anymore, Yu Wuxiao said with a smile. Out of habit, he wanted to pat Chunzong on the shoulder, but when he raised his hand, he suddenly stopped. Chunzong also noticed this and could only sigh in his heart. This was the difference, the absolute difference in strength. Unless Yu Wuxia could cultivate to the saint level one day, there was no way to eliminate this difference. However, it was still considered good. Yinxin, you stay here and protect Master. I'll be right back, Chunzong said. Once he finished speaking, he took a step forward and disappeared as if he had entered the void. Immediately afterwards, everywhere on Heaven Continent, wherever there were disciples of the Infernal Order, a figure would step out of thin air. As soon as he appeared, before he could become clear, he would shoot out sword chi with a flick of his finger, killing the black-robed disciples of the Infernal Order one by one. Chunzong was extremely fast, and under the cover of his mixed Yuan heart force, nothing on Heaven Continent could hide from him. In less than half a day, all the disciples of the Infernal Order on Heaven Continent had been eliminated by Chunzong. It didn't matter if they were at the 6th realm or the 7th realm. They couldn't withstand a single flick of sword chi from Chunzong's finger. They were instantly killed. It's done. Chunzong immediately smiled when he reappeared before the single-hearted Tao Emperor and the others. He spoke casually, as if he had just returned from a stroll. Yinxin smiled slightly. The single-hearted Tao Emperor and the others were stunned, and then their eyes widened. It's done? What does he mean? All the disciples of the Infernal Order on Heaven Continent are dead, Chunzong added. The single-hearted Tao Emperor and the others felt as if their heads were about to explode. Is this the ability of a saint rank expert? In less than half a day, thousands of disciples of the Infernal Order on a continent had actually all died. They wouldn't find it strange if a saint rank expert killed hundreds or even thousands of people with a single strike, but these people were scattered all over Heaven Continent and didn't gather together. If they wanted to kill them, they would have to search everywhere, and that would take a lot of time. Master, I have an idea, Chunzong suddenly said as he looked at the single-hearted Tao Emperor. The single-hearted sutra is difficult to grasp, but if you can grasp it, even if it's only the first layer, the 10-hearted intense, it'll be of great help to your cultivation. The single-hearted Tao Emperor listened quietly. The single-hearted sutra is difficult to learn and master. It won't be so easy to pass it down. Chunzong said seriously, why don't we set up a sect of our own with Master as the leader? Set up a sect. The single-hearted Tao Emperor and the others muttered to themselves, but their eyes gradually lit up. Pass it down. This was a huge matter to any power, a matter of the utmost importance. Only by passing it down would they be considered alive. It wasn't just a power, it was the same for an individual. After all, the second founding elder of the Taihao Mountain had created the void-killing sword mantra. He wanted to pass it down, but he was unable to find a suitable successor. In the end, he took a fancy to Chunzong. Even though he did not take Chunzong as his disciple, he still passed the void-killing sword mantra to Chunzong and passed it down. That way, even if he died, there would still be Chunzong who possessed the void-killing sword mantra. The Single-Hearted Sutra was an extremely astonishing supplementary cultivation method. The Single-Hearted Tao Emperor naturally wanted to pass it down and even develop it. Otherwise, he would not have left behind a few secret realms in space, leaving behind the introductory cultivation method of the Single-Hearted Sutra so that others could obtain it. However, it was very unfortunate that after so many years, many people had obtained the introductory cultivation method of the Single-Hearted Sutra. However, there were very, very few who were able to grasp it. Otherwise, there would be more. The environment of the universe was better than space. It was larger as well. There were more people and more geniuses. Naturally, there would be more people who could cultivate the Single-Hearted Sutra. Qin Ying and Tianchu were the disciples that the Single-Hearted Tao Emperor had accepted in the past few decades. They had already grasped the basics of the Single-Hearted Sutra. The Single-Hearted Tao Emperor's experience was limited to the Nine Heavens universe. In the Nine Heavens universe, he could find two people who were suitable to cultivate the Single-Hearted Sutra within a few decades. In such a vast universe, the scope and number of people were hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of times more than the Nine Heavens universe. There would definitely be more people who were suitable to cultivate the Single-Hearted Sutra. He did not ask for the Single-Hearted Sutra to spread throughout the universe, but at least it could be passed down. Tempted. The Single-Hearted Tao Emperor was very tempted by Chunzong's words. In fact, he had this idea a long time ago. However, he did not dare to think too much about it, because his strength was not enough. At least, he had to wait until he broke through to the seventh realm before he considered establishing his own sect. Now that Chunzong had brought it up, a saint-level expert had brought it up, it meant different things. Master, establish the Single-Hearted Tao. You will be the sect leader. Chunzong saw that the Single-Hearted Tao Emperor was very tempted. He said again, Nian, Xin, and I can be the elders. Okay. The Single-Hearted Tao Emperor was also a very decisive person. In that case, we will establish the Single-Hearted Tao. We will establish a sect for the Single-Hearted Tao. Under such circumstances, the Tao of one heart was hastily created in a few sentences. Establishing a sect and passing it down was naturally not a simple matter. However, the current environment did not allow for such complications. They could only first confirm their intentions, the name of the sect to be established, and so on. They had to confirm some basic things. Currently, there were only 7 Single-Hearted Tao Emperors. The strongest was the saint level, and the weakest was the third realm. The gap between their levels was very big. It was like the gap between heaven and earth. The Single-Hearted Tao Emperor was the sect leader of the Single-Hearted Tao sect. He was called the Single-Hearted Tao Master. Luo Beichuan and Yu Wuxia were both fifth realm. They were temporarily listed as the elders of the Single-Hearted Tao sect. The Single-Hearted Tao Master was the title of the Single-Hearted Tao Master. He was also a sixth realm emperor. As for Qing Ying and Tianchu, they were only third realm. Of course, they could not hold any positions. They were only disciples. As for Chunzong and Yunyanxin, although Yunyanxin did not cultivate the Single-Hearted Sutra, she was Chunzong's Tao companion. Therefore, these two saints became the Tao protectors of the Single-Hearted Tao sect. They were Tao saints of the Single-Hearted Tao sect. Their status was extremely high, and they were not inferior to the Single-Hearted Tao Master. With these two saints, the potential of the Single-Hearted Tao sect was unfathomable. It could even be considered a holy land, the smallest holy land. Of course, the Single-Hearted Tao Emperor also intended to establish the Single-Hearted Tao sect as a unique sect. It would not have as many disciples as other factions. It would take the path of elites. Chunzong did not object to this. In fact, even if there were some people in the universe who could cultivate the single-hearted sutra, not all of them would be accepted into the single-hearted Tao sect. In the end, only a small portion of them would be accepted into the single-hearted Tao sect. On this deserted and remote island, Chunzong and the single-hearted Tao Emperor started to discuss various matters regarding the single-hearted Tao sect. The single-hearted sutra was extremely superb. Just the mastery of the single-hearted 10 intents alone was enough for an ordinary genius to have the possibility of catching up to a top genius. After all, they could not maintain the single-hearted 10 intents all the time like Chunzong. The time they could use it every day was limited. However, during that period of time, it was extremely helpful for cultivation and comprehension. However, it was also because of this that the cultivation of the single-hearted sutra was extremely difficult. The single-hearted Tao Emperor could be considered very lucky to have met two suitable ones within a few decades. After the initial definition of the single-hearted Tao sect, the rest could only be slowly perfected in the future. Chunzong made a move and left this place. He was prepared to bring his master, senior brothers, junior sisters, and junior brothers to find a suitable place to establish the foundation of the single-hearted Tao sect. A good place was even more beneficial for cultivation. The cultivation of a single-hearted sutra did not require any unique environment. Whether it was a place with barren vitality or a place with rich vitality, there was basically no difference. This was because the single-hearted sutra had nothing to do with vitality. However, if the single-hearted Tao sect wanted to establish the Tao and take root in this universe and pass it down, it also needed to cultivate other cultivation techniques and martial arts. The single-hearted sutra was an extremely important support. However, the cultivation of other cultivation techniques required a good environment. As for Chunzong's single-minded chaotic prime realm, he had embarked on a different path. Even though Chunzong did not mind passing it down, there were many factors that contributed to him being able to embark on this path. None of these factors could be missing, and it would be difficult for him to recreate it. Chapter 31:20. Chunzong had initially established the Tao of One Heart, but there was no suitable location for it at the moment, and it was impossible for him to bring everyone around. Everyone was not strong enough, and bringing them along would affect Chunzong's efficiency to a certain extent. In addition, Chunzong also had follow-up plans, so it would be inconvenient to bring them along. In the end, they decided to send everyone to Taihao Mountain first. With Chunzong's current status and importance in Taihao Mountain, no one would say anything if he sent a few people there, even if they did not join Taihao Mountain and stayed there temporarily. Moreover, they were Chunzong's original sect. After temporarily settling his master and the others, Chunzong began to investigate information about the Infernal Order, the Infernal Demon Gate, and the Church of Gods. Purging the outer universe, eradicating the three major malignant tumors, and returning the outer universe to a peaceful state. Competition would always exist, and life and death were unavoidable. However, these were all normal and belonged to the normal environment of the universe, and also the normal environment of the world of cultivators. The goal of the Infernal Demon Gate and the Infernal Order was to suppress or eradicate all the other forces and dominate the universe. The Church of God's goal was similar. This was not a good thing for the universe. It was like throwing a large amount of garbage into a pool of clear water, directly harming the living creatures living in the water. When one did not have the ability, one could only watch from the sidelines. However, when one had the ability, one had to take action. In the past, Chunzong had won first place on the 3 lists consecutively and was recognized by the will of the universe. When he broke through, he also received great help from the will of the universe. This was equivalent to a debt of gratitude. Now, Chunzong had to repay it. Moreover, there were benefits to doing so. The will of the universe was high and mighty, overseeing everything. If one purged the malignant tumors of the universe, one would also receive the will of the universe's favor. When that time came, while one was in this part of the universe, one would receive the will of the universe's favor, and one's force would also receive the will of the universe's care. No matter which aspect one looked at, one had to take action. Taihao Mountain was a powerful sacred ground. Even though they suffered heavy losses from the attack of the Inferno Demon Gate, the second High Elder had broken through to the Saint Realm. Chunzong had returned as a Grand Sword Saint. Together with Chunzong's Dao partner, Sword Saint Qing Huang, the overall strength of Taihao Mountain had grown even stronger. Soon, Chunzong found out the locations of several strongholds of the Purgatory Demon Gate, Infernal Order, and God Worship Sect. Taking Yunyan Xin with him, Chunzong immediately set off and rushed there as fast as he could. The sword might of a great sword saint was released in an instant, and it immediately spread out in all directions, covering everything within a radius of 100,000 meters. The members of the Purgatory Demon sect who were within the range of the sword might were like mosquitoes that had fallen into a spider's web, unable to move, and could only feel fear. Destroy. It was as if Chunzong's words were law. It was as if he had transformed into a high and mighty god, and he softly spat out a word. The word sounded very subtle, but it was also like a thunderclap that could split heaven and earth. The monstrous sword might struck down in an instant, rolling along with countless accents, and directly hitting the disciples of the Purgatory Demon sect who were within 100,000 meters of the sword might. They were all hit by the sword might, and their bodies involuntarily trembled. Their eyes were filled with intense fear and terror, but there was nothing they could do. The light quickly dimmed. Their souls scattered. With the impact of Chunzong's sword might at the great sword saint level, even a quasi-saint would find it difficult to resist, let alone a group of cultivators whose strongest was only at the half-saint level. They were like ants. Silently, in less than a breath's time, thousands of people were directly buried here, dying an unnatural death. No wounds could be seen on their bodies, but there was no vitality left. Their spirits had been completely shattered and they had died. After doing all this, Chunzong also took the wealth of this place and the things he wanted. He might not be able to use them himself, but he could give them to Taihao Mountain to cultivate disciples. He could also keep some for Yi and Dao, to establish a sect and pass it on. In addition to the martial arts manuals, it also needed resources. Otherwise, in the absence of resources, it would become difficult to pass it on, just like how a clever housewife can't cook without rice. The first stronghold was eliminated. Not long after, with his super-fast speed, Chunzong arrived at the second stronghold. He didn't make a move, and he didn't need to. In the absence of a saint-level expert as an enemy, he only needed to release the shocking sword might. Suppress. Destroy the spirits. Their souls scattered, and they died completely, leaving only an empty shell. The third stronghold. The fourth stronghold. With Yunyan Xin, Chunzong constantly moved to eliminate the strongholds of the three malignant tumors as quickly as possible. It didn't matter which one it was, as long as it was close enough. Chunzong's killing speed was extremely fast, and he didn't waste any time to prevent the other strongholds from reacting. Kill, kill, kill. He killed silently. His hands were not stained with the slightest trace of blood, but he killed a lot of people. The sixth stronghold was a stronghold of the God Worship sect. Or rather, it was not an ordinary stronghold, but the headquarters of the God Worship sect. The void was torn apart by an extremely tyrannical force, and an amazing divine might poured out from the crack like a torrent bursting a dam. It was extremely violent and ferocious, as if it was going to destroy the mountains. The God Worship sect had descended and crossed the boundary. It was because his sect was about to be destroyed by Chunzong. Once it was destroyed, he would lose his stronghold in this universe, and it would be difficult for him to enter this universe again. It should be known that he had paid a great price to finally step into this universe. If he lost it now, the loss would be disastrous. Therefore, he descended to eradicate this threat. Chunzong's expression changed involuntarily. Spiritual God Worship sect. It turned out to be a divine demon expert at the spiritual God realm. Not bad. If it was at the divine Lord realm, he would have to be very cautious because the strength of a divine Lord realm expert was extremely tyrannical. Even the weakest divine Lord realm expert was not confident that he could defeat him. If it was a powerful divine Lord realm expert, he would be lucky if he could survive. In Chunzong's eyes, a Divine Lord Realm expert was a Divine Lord Realm expert. If he could refine and absorb it, his cultivation would be further improved, and he would be closer to the perfection stage. The perfection stage. Chunzong estimated that once his cultivation reached the perfection stage, he would be able to contend with an ordinary Divine Ancestor Realm expert with his own ability, even without using the ocean-suppressing pearl. What did that mean? It meant that from now on, he would surpass the level of Great Sword Saint and truly step into the Divine Ancestor Realm. Even if he was just an ordinary Divine Ancestor Realm expert, if he used the power of the ocean-suppressing pearl, he could reach a high level among the Divine Ancestor Realm experts. The divine power became even more vast, tyrannical, and astonishing. Chunzong did not interrupt it, but allowed the divine demon expert to descend. When the divine demon finally descended, Yunyanxin retreated to one side. This tyrannical aura made her realize that this divine demon was a spiritual god realm expert that surpassed the principal god realm. He was not someone she could fight against. When the divine demon completely crossed over and descended into the outer universe, Chunzong also erupted in an instant, releasing monstrous sword power and releasing the inner universe. The inner universe was released, the prodigious astral sword domain and the ocean-suppressing domain. Chunzong did not make a move, but once he made a move, he used his full strength in order to prevent the divine demon expert from escaping. Suppression. The pitiful divine demon expert had just descended, but before he could fully display his divine power and speak, he immediately felt his surroundings being confined. Even the divine demon body that he was so proud of was suppressed in an instant. The invisible pressure was extremely tyrannical, like an ancient divine mountain, immediately making it difficult for him to move. Erupt. Because of the fear in his heart, he instantly unleashed all of his power, even if it would cause some damage to his body. However, it was already too late. An extremely dazzling light suddenly lit up in front of him. At first, it was incomparably faint, but in the blink of an eye, it became blazing and filled his eyes as if it had transformed into a world. Triple divine firmament. Chunzong attacked with his full strength. He didn't give his spirit god realm fiend god any chance to escape. He attacked with a fatal blow. He wanted to take the spirit god's life with a single sword strike. Can't dodge. Can't block. The divine demon was directly hit by triple divine firmament. The terrifying sword intent and sword chi entered his body, wreaking havoc and wantonly destroying his vitality. Even the tyrannical divine demon body could not withstand it in the slightest. Suppression. Kill. Absorption of divinity. The entire process was extremely short, from beginning to end in less than a breath's time. This pitiful divine demon had just descended, and he was finished off before he could even display his powerful strength. Chunzong glanced at the divine firmament. Without the slightest hesitation, he directly absorbed it into his inner universe and rapidly refined it. At first, Chunzong still needed some time to refine the divine firmament, but now he only needed less than 3 breaths' time to refine it. After 3 breaths' time, Chunzong had completely refined the divine firmament. Chunzong also felt that his cultivation had increased a little, but it was not very obvious. If I want to raise my cultivation to perfection, I'll probably need 3 more divine firmament. Chunzong could not help but secretly estimate, if it's divine firmament, I'll probably need more than 100. Thinking of this, Chunzong could not help but reveal a bitter smile. 3 strands of Lord God level divinity were equivalent to 3 Lord God level divine demons. Killing 3 Lord God level divine demons was extremely difficult. Moreover, with his current strength, he would not be able to kill a divine firmament powerhouse under normal circumstances. He might even be killed instead. Therefore, it was impossible for him to kill 3 divine Lord-level god fiends. As for killing more than 100 divine firmament powerhouses, well, for the current Chunzong, it would not be difficult to kill a divine firmament powerhouse in a one-on-one situation. Even if it was a 1-on-2 or even a 1-on-3 situation, he would only need to spend a little more time and effort to kill them. But where would he find more than 100 divine firmament powerhouses? It seemed that it was only possible to break into the divine firmament. Not to mention that he could not enter the divine firmament. Even if he could, he would not do so. The divine firmament was the original world of the divine firmament. In the divine firmament, the strength of the divine firmament could be released to the greatest extent. The strength of the same divine firmament in the divine firmament was definitely several times stronger than in other worlds. Gently shaking his head, Chun Zong cast these thoughts aside. It was useless to think too much. Everything depended on luck. As for the rest, he would first eliminate the 3 malignant tumors. Chapter 31:21. Dense demonic aura surged like the waves of the sea. It surged back and forth and spread in all directions, directly forming a desolate region. It was like a barrier that surrounded the surroundings, sealing off the sky and firmly protecting the interior. The interior was a vast expanse of land. Demonic chi billowed on the ground, surging endlessly like a tidal wave. Loud roars rang out continuously, filled with violence and savagery, as though they were enraged and wanted to destroy everything. They were extremely violent. The gigantic figure traversed across the sky, its wings spread out, covering thousands of meters, covering the sky and the sun. The extremely terrifying demonic aura was overwhelming. In the distance, there was a gigantic figure that was thousands of meters tall, running on the ground like a mountain. Although its speed was not very fast, every step it took would cause the ground to shake, as if it had triggered a magnitude 10 earthquake, causing the sky to fall and the earth to crack. This land was extremely vast, located in the center of the land, and there were countless huge palaces. These palaces were filled with an ancient aura, and the style of construction was very ancient. Every palace was filled with a tyrannical aura, especially a few of the palaces. The aura was extremely tyrannical, beyond the ordinary, reaching the level of the saint realm. If an outsider came here, they would be shocked to find that there were many saint-level cultivators in the Purgatory Demon sect. Of course, some of the saint-level cultivators had a strange chi. It wasn't normal. It seemed to be full of violence and madness. In a main, huge, ancient palace, there were many people gathered. Each of them was abnormally tall and strong, and some of them looked even weirder, as if they had no bones. They were like poisonous snakes, emitting a frightening cold aura, and even their eyes had the characteristics of snakes. But everyone in this palace had a tyrannical aura. Sect leader, 3 of our strongholds have been uprooted, and the losses are great. An abnormally majestic expert of the Purgatory Demon sect, whose body was more than 5 meters tall, spoke. His voice was like rolling thunder, reverberating in the hall, and its power was extremely shocking. Have you found out who did it? The entire body of the Purgatory Demon sect leader was abnormally huge, but he seemed to be shrouded in a layer of mist, so vague and mysterious. When his voice rang out, the layer of demonic chi that had transformed into mist fluctuated, surging endlessly like a tidal wave, causing his voice to fluctuate, bringing with it a kind of heavy sound wave that swept over and entered everyone's ears. We haven't found out yet, but we can be sure that it was done by one person, a tyrannical sword saint. Sword saint. It seemed like a sigh. There are very few powerful sword saints in the entire outer universe, so it's easy to find out. Sect leader, I suggest that we set up traps in the future strongholds, directly kill this sword saint, or suppress him, and refine him into a puppet to fight for our sect. Chun Zong took Yun Yinshin, constantly going to strongholds one after another, according to the information found by the Taihao Mountain. These strongholds were either the Purgatory Demon sect, the Infernal Order, or the God Worship sect. In any case, in Chun Zong's eyes, these 3 forces were the malignant tumors of the outer universe, which would endanger the stability of the outer universe and threaten the will of the outer universe. If the outer universe was compared to the human body, then the will of the outer universe was equivalent to a person's thoughts and will. The invasion of the three forces was like a virus raging in the human body, wantonly destroying the human body's mechanisms, and in the end may cause the human body to be completely damaged and then affect the spiritual will. This was not allowed by the will of the universe. But the will of the universe could not directly eradicate them, so it could only rely on other forces. This stronghold was the fifth stronghold of the Purgatory Demon sect, and if the total stronghold was counted, it should be the 13th. In the previous stronghold, Chunzong failed to find the enemy, who should have retreated after hearing the news. Chunzong was a step late. He only hoped that the stronghold would not fail. When he arrived at the stronghold, Chunzong frowned slightly. At first, he did not feel any strong aura fluctuations, but when he carefully sent out the mixed Yuan heart force to sense, Chunzong's mouth suddenly hung a slight smile, which disappeared in an instant, as if it had never appeared. Interesting, Chunzong thought, because Chunzong's mixed Yuan heart force sensed that there were some auras hidden in this stronghold, some very strong auras, which had reached the level of the saint level, and each was different. 4. Saint level. In other words, in this stronghold of the Purgatory Demon sect, there were a total of 4 saint level experts hiding, waiting for Chunzong's arrival, and then erupting with tyrannical power to kill Chunzong or suppress Chunzong. This situation made Chunzong feel that it was interesting. This was the counterattack of the Purgatory Demon sect. It was really interesting, but was it enough to only send out 4 saint-level experts? The truth would let them know that their thoughts and actions were too naive. 4 saint-level experts. One of them had a stronger aura, which should be at the level of the Great Saint realm, but as long as there were not several great saints or divine ancestors, they could not do anything to him. Not to mention that there was Yunyin, a top-little saint realm expert, on his side. However, Chunzong also thought that the strength of the Purgatory Demon sect seemed to be very strong, unexpectedly strong, to be able to send out 4 saint-level experts, including the Great Saint Realm expert killed by him and the saint-level demon puppet killed by Yunyin. This strength was not inferior to the powerful holy lands in the inner layer of the mysterious world of the ancient universe. Suddenly, Chunzong became more and more interested in the Purgatory Demon sect, and, at the same time, he thought of the Infernal Order. This demon sect could be evenly matched with the Purgatory Demon sect, so its strength must be very strong, not inferior to the Purgatory Demon sect. Otherwise, it would have been annexed or destroyed by the Purgatory Demon sect. 4 saint-level experts, no matter what, the Purgatory Demon sect should have put in a lot of effort. In this case, he could not let down their good intentions. His figure flashed. Chunzong stepped into the stronghold without hesitation, as if he did not know anything. But after stepping into the stronghold, the attack did not come immediately. Are you still not going to take action? Chunzong stood in the empty stronghold, his expression unchanged, but a slight smile hung at the corner of his mouth, and his voice was neither slow nor fast. Yunyin was shocked at first. His eyes flickered and immediately swept in all directions. His tyrannical sword essence also gathered, and an amazing blazing aura suddenly spread out, as if to burn everything. But in an instant, the sword essence was restrained and calmed down. So it's you, unparalleled sword saint of Mount Taihao, Chunzong. A strange sound rang out, seemingly coming from all directions. It was like the rumbling of thunder, emitting waves of intense, rumbling sounds. A terrifying aura also burst out, coming from 4 different directions. The bombardment came, sealed off the surroundings, and isolated everything, as if to suppress Chunzong. The Purgatory Demon sect invasion of Mount Taihao was originally in the bag. After all, the Sword Saint of Mount Taihao was restrained by 2 great demons of the Purgatory Demon sect, and even fell into a disadvantageous position. It was only a matter of time before he was defeated, and the first elder of Mount Taihao had also fallen. Under such circumstances, it was only a matter of time before Mount Taihao was breached. Unexpectedly, Chunzong's return was directly a variable, the biggest variable. Because of Chunzong's return, not only did the Purgatory Demon sect fail in that battle, but they also suffered heavy losses. As a result, Chunzong was completely remembered by the Purgatory Demon sect. They didn't expect that this time, Chunzong would walk right into their trap. In the eyes of the Purgatory Demon sect, this was indeed the case. They could take this opportunity to suppress Chunzong, and it would be best to capture him and refine him into a divine puppet. With such strength, after being refined into a divine puppet, he would directly become the top combat force of the Purgatory Demon sect. Unfortunately, although their idea was very good, things didn't go as they wished, and Chunzong directly exploded. The astral sword domain, released from the inner universe, was directly equivalent to the superposition of two great path domains, and its power was even more shocking. But that wasn't all. Chunzong also activated the power of the ocean-suppressing orb and released the ocean-suppressing domain. Within a radius of 100,000 meters, the astral sword domain covered the entire area. In the sky, there were stars twinkling endlessly, and there were a total of 10,000 stars. In the middle, there was a huge galaxy, and in the middle, there was a dark red true sun that burned endlessly. The flame at the very center was a kind of black, as if it was the black of darkness, and it made people's hearts palpitate when they looked at it. Around this dark red true sun, there were 15 planets. The planet closest to the true sun looked the smallest, and the 15th planet farthest away looked the largest, and the aura that it exuded was also the most powerful. This represented the single-hearted sword technique and the ultimate technique, Tai Hao. Not far away, a silver divine halo that was thousands of meters long traversed the universe, like a true dragon cruising, and filled with an indescribable sharpness, as if it could cut and tear everything apart. Its speed was extremely shocking, as if it could ignore the distance of time and space and travel freely. Divine firmament. Below, there was a dark blue sea that filled the air, and it surged endlessly, directly covering and suppressing everything around it. Under such a powerful force, even a divine ancestor would feel the obvious pressure, let alone a few saints. Suppression. Including the only great saint, they were suppressed by Chunzong's astral sword domain, and for a moment, they were unable to move. Draw the sword. Without any hesitation, Chunzong slashed out with his sword, and divine firmament, 3 times stronger than before, directly attacked the great saint expert. As for the 3 pristine saints, they couldn't break free from the suppression of the astral sword domain, no matter what secret techniques they used. This suppression was too strong. Death. In just a short time, all 4 saints were killed, and none of them were left alive. They didn't even have a chance to attack. I believe that the Inferno Demon Gate will feel the pain of killing them. Chunzong secretly smiled. Even for a powerful ancient holy land like the Myriad Swords Peak, the loss of 4 saint-level powerhouses, especially a great saint, was still very heavy. Nianxin, let's go. Chunzong called you Nianxin and prepare to go to the next stronghold. Chapter 31:22. In the vast universe, the void was boundless. There was only darkness as far as the eye could see. Countless stars were entrenched in it, either rotating or revolving. On one of the deserted stars, there were only 2 figures. One was Chunzong, and the other was Nianxin. Nianxin, have you really thought it through? Chunzong's expression was grave, and his tone was somewhat cautious. Because Nianxin's decision was too shocking, they couldn't act rashly. Once the decision was made, once it started, it couldn't be reversed. Even a top divine ancestor, like the Eternal Sword Master, couldn't reverse it. What would the consequences be? It was hard to say. It was very likely that all their previous efforts would be wasted, and they would become disabled or even die directly. This was a risk. Chunzong was against risking their own lives, but this was Nianxin's decision. I've thought it through. Nianxin's expression was firm, and she didn't waver at all. I have a feeling that by burning my bloodline, not only can I break the memory seal and recover my memories, but I also have a chance to ascend to the peak because I've already comprehended the Tai Hao spirit that belongs to me. Okay, in this case, no matter how much Chunzong objected, it was useless. As an excellent cultivator, Chunzong deeply understood the difficulties and dangers of the path of cultivation, and he could understand it better. Back off. Yun Yinxin's expression was grave, and she took a deep breath. This time, it was equivalent to abolishing the powerful bloodline power that had reached the saint level. It was the super powerful bloodline power that the ancient phoenix ancestor had given to Yun Yinxin. Such a saint-level bloodline had brought extraordinary talent and strength to Yun Yinxin. Being able to break through to the saint level in such a short time, in addition to her own efforts, at least half of the reason was due to the ancient phoenix bloodline. But now, Yun Yinxin planned to abolish this bloodline because the existence of this bloodline sealed her memories. That kind of feeling was very uncomfortable, and she didn't like it. But because the price of abolishing the bloodline was too great and too heavy, Yun Yinxin had been thinking for a while, and she finally made up her mind now. It was also because she had comprehended the Great Sky Spirit. Different people would have different understandings of the Great Spirit, but as long as one could comprehend it, they would be able to benefit from it. There were several ways to abolish a person's bloodline. One of them was the most direct way to abolish a person's bloodline. However, doing so was equivalent to wasting a person's bloodline power. Yun Yinxin did not intend to use this method. Burn. He would burn the ancient phoenix bloodline completely and thoroughly so that he could find an opportunity to sublimate in the extreme realm and break through to the great sage realm. This was Yun Yinxin's plan. With a shout, an astonishingly blazing aura suddenly erupted, rushing in all directions. An ancient phoenix mark suddenly appeared between Yun Yinxin's eyebrows. It was incomparably red, as if it was about to drip blood. However, it then burned with incomparable intensity. Layers of golden red flames spread out, sweeping in all directions. Burn! Yun Yinxin's body was completely set ablaze. The terrifying blazing flames continued to spread, flowing on the ground and surging in the sky like the water of the sea. At the same time, an extremely resounding cry rang out, shaking up the space. It directly blasted open cracks in space, which spread out with shocking speed like a bolt of lightning. It was like a twisted spider web that covered the surroundings. Immediately, a phoenix phantom appeared in the sky. At first, it was only a few dozen meters in size, but it continued to expand. Soon, it reached a few hundred meters in size, and then it broke through 1,000 meters. It reached a few thousand meters in size, and finally it reached 10,000 meters. The Crimson Phoenix Phantom, which was 10,000 meters in size, hovered in the sky. Wisps of golden red flames continued to burn on its body, burning wildly as if they would never be extinguished. The flames that spread out from Yun Yinxin's body also continued to spreading out on this small deserted star. Chunzong stood in the void of the universe outside the star, staring at this scene with a solemn expression. The super-strong mixed yuan heart force also spread out, covering all directions. He was highly aware of everything and did not miss anything. Once there were any signs of trouble, he would do his best to suppress it, even if he had to pay a price. This was his way of protecting Yun Yinxin. The mark between Yun Yinxin's eyebrows became clearer, and the golden red flames that burned around her body also gradually changed, turning into a pure pale gold color. When the flames completely turned pale gold, the aura that it exuded suddenly rose to a new height, surpassing the peak of the pristine saint realm and stepping into the great saint realm. This was Yun Yinxin beginning to burn the origin of the ancient phoenix bloodline. Ordinary burning of bloodline power could be exchanged for greater power, but there would also be sequelae. However, as long as one rested and recuperated, one would completely recover, only consuming some resources and time. However, if one burned the origin of bloodline power, it was equivalent to a permanent loss. The possibility of recovery was very low unless one had a great opportunity. Therefore, those who had mastered the power of bloodline power would not choose to burn the origin of bloodline power. It was equivalent to overdrawing one's potential, and it would affect one's future cultivation and strength. If one really had no choice but to burn the origin of bloodline power, one would usually burn a small part of it. However, Yunyanxin did not stop at all. She was burning the origin of bloodline power completely and wanted to burn it completely. As the origin of the ancient phoenix bloodline power at the saint level burned frantically, the pale golden flames also continued to deepen, turning golden. In the sky, the golden-red flames burning on the body of the 10,000 meters flaming phoenix phantom also turned pale gold, and also turned pure gold. As the color of the flames changed, the aura emitted became more tyrannical, more terrifying, and more shocking. Such an aura fluctuation had been constantly spreading, and it was going to spread further. Unfortunately, Chunzong had already been prepared. He released the inner universe, and this tyrannical aura was sealed within the range of the inner universe. Otherwise, it would definitely attract many powerhouses. As long as it was not a divine ancestor, Chunzong was confident. However, it was better to avoid trouble. Who knew if there would be some accidents if many powerhouses or even cosmic beasts were attracted? Sometimes a little accident could lead to serious and bad consequences, and it was too late to regret. Cosmic beasts were all at the saint level, and there were even many at the great saint level. For example, the Tide Dragon that he had seen with his own eyes in the past was a great saint-level cosmic beast. The flames turned pure gold, and the aura emitted increased by a lot after entering the great saint realm. The ancient phoenix mark on Yunyanxin's glabella also flew out and turned into a small pure gold phoenix, burning incessantly. At the same time, in the mysterious ancient world of the inner universe, the ancient phoenix patriarch, who was sleeping, suddenly shook and directly woke up. How could it be? How dare she? The ancient phoenix patriarch's huge pale gold eyes were filled with disbelief. The person he had chosen as the bloodline inheritor was actually going to abolish her bloodline. That was the saint-level ancient phoenix bloodline. As long as she had this bloodline, she could reach his height in the future. How amazing was that? Now, the other party was actually going to give it up. Incomprehensible. The ancient phoenix patriarch expressed that he could not understand, but the distance was too far, and he was powerless to stop it. The ancient phoenix bloodline origin was completely burned, burning to the extreme, and directly burned into nothing. Even Yunyanxin's original bloodline was burning together, turning into a force that pushed Yunyanxin's realm to begin to sublimate. Extreme sublimation. The small deserted star was also constantly being refined under the burning of the terrifying great saint-level golden flames. The impurities were burned into ashes and completely turned into nothingness. In the end, only a fist-sized star core origin was left. It was dark gold, as if the dark gold flames had condensed into a substance and compressed it. A true sun also appeared in the sky, suspended above the 10,000-meter golden flame phoenix shadow, and shone in all directions. This was the Tai House spirit that Yunyanxin had comprehended. The true sun fell, and the dark gold star origin in the sky suddenly merged with each other. During this process, Chunzong could not interfere. It was all up to Yunyanxin. When the two merged into one, the true sun erupted and directly exploded, turning into countless starlight. Tens of thousands of rays fell and directly rushed into the 10,000-meter golden flame phoenix shadow. It was as if tens of thousands of swords had pierced through the golden flame phoenix shadow, and the golden flame phoenix shadow was shattered. Chunzong's eyes suddenly narrowed. The most critical moment had arrived. Whether they could succeed or not depended on this moment. Silence. As the golden flame phoenix shadow was shattered, everything fell into silence, as if it was a silent world. Yunyanxin's body trembled, and the flames on her body flickered, as if they were about to be extinguished. Once the flames were extinguished, she would be completely destroyed, and there would be no possibility of recovery. As the flames flickered, they were like a candle in the wind, on the verge of collapse. However, Yunyanxin's expression was firm, and she did not compromise at all. She made a last stand with her supreme belief and supreme will. Condense. In an instant, the shattered golden flame phoenix turned into countless rays of light, spinning like stardust. They quickly converged toward the center and turned into a huge stardust vortex. It spun endlessly, as if it was drawing the power of the entire universe. Chunzong's inner universe released outward, and he felt that it was difficult to support it. Fall. The stardust vortex suddenly fell, and bits of golden light flickered, sprinkling on Yu Nianxin's body. The flickering flames, like a candle in the wind, instantly stabilized, and then gradually became more intense. Yu Nianxin's aura, which had declined to the extreme, also stopped declining, stabilized, and then began to strengthen. However, Chunzong did not let down his guard at all. He was still staring, and his mixed yuan heart force was slightly fluctuating. The ocean-suppressing orb was also constantly operating. It only needed a moment to release all its power, suppress Yu Nianxin's power, and interrupt this change. Doing so might cause Yu Nianxin to lose all her power, but at least she could save her life. As long as she could save her life and survive, it meant that there was still hope. No matter how difficult it was, there was still hope. However, if she died, everything would be useless, because if she died, there would be no hope. Chapter 31:23. Flames. The pure golden flames burned fiercely, incessantly, and without end. The star, which was barren and devoid of life, had long been burned to ashes by the terrifying flames, leaving only the most basic and core star origin. However, it was also integrated into Yu Nianxin's Taihao spiritual fire, which then shattered the golden flame phoenix that was manifested by burning the ancient phoenix bloodline origin. The series of changes did not stop at all. The star fire vortex condensed and fell, completely covering Yu Nianxin's body, as if it had turned into a huge cocoon. It was a huge cocoon that flickered with countless stars, completely covering and wrapping Yu Nianxin. Chunzong found that his mixed yuan heart force was also isolated, unable to penetrate into the huge cocoon and observe Yu Nianxin's situation. In this way, everything depended on Yu Nianxin's own fate. Even if he sacrificed the sea-suppressing orb, he would not be able to interfere in the slightest. Suspended in the vast void of the universe, Chunzong stared at the starry cocoon while paying attention to the movements around him, preventing any external object from approaching and disturbing him. Suddenly, Chunzong felt a strange movement. He raised his head and stared up, as if he wanted to see something. In Chunzong's super-sensitive perception, there was a mysterious and unfathomable power condensing in the void above. The will of the universe. Chunzong was secretly shocked. Why was the power of the will of the universe condensing? No, to be precise, why was the will of the universe condensing a mysterious and unfathomable power? Why? Could it be, in the sky above, it was originally a dark void, as if there was no end in sight? However, countless streams of light converged, and each stream of light was so small that it was difficult to detect. Only a few people could perceive it. Countless streams of light converged in the sky above, forming a huge eye. It seemed to be golden, but also seemed to be empty. It was the eye of the heavenly Tao, the manifestation of the universe's will. As the eye of the heavenly Tao appeared, Chunzong immediately felt an indescribable power permeate the air and descend, as if suppressing everything. Time, space, and everything else came to a standstill in an instant, and he could not move at all. Chunzong even found that he couldn't move his body. Even the speed of his thinking was stretched infinitely, becoming very slow. His usual thinking was also slowed down by more than 100 times. After the eye of the heavenly Tao glanced at Chunzong, Chunzong felt as if he had been seen through. All his secrets seemed to have been exposed, and this feeling made Chunzong extremely shocked. Although his current strength was not yet at the divine ancestor level, he could still contend with some divine ancestors to a certain extent if he used all his strength. However, under the gaze of the eye of the heavenly Tao, he felt as if he had been completely seen through, and even his thinking was stagnant. It was really terrifying. The eye of the heavenly Tao only glanced at Chunzong for a moment, and then immediately moved its attention away. Its attention fell directly on the starlight cocoon, which seemed to have become transparent, but Chunzong still could not see anything. A sudden change occurred. From the eye of the heavenly Tao, strands of starlight flew out, as if thousands of stars were descending, bringing with them an incomparably mysterious aura. It was extremely mysterious, and they fell on the giant cocoon one after another, and then penetrated into the giant cocoon. In the next moment, the eye of the heavenly Tao dissipated, but before it disappeared, it seemed to look at Chunzong again, and this look seemed to convey a message. This was a kind of feedback to Chunzong. Feedback to me? Chunzong found that the confinement around him had disappeared and could not help but think. In fact, he actually had some connection with the will of the outer universe. Being ranked first on the 3 lists, he had received great care from the will of the universe. And after his breakthrough, he had received a lot of help. And now, his action of eliminating the Purgatory Demon sect, the Infernal Order, and the God Worship sect was helping the will of the universe to clean up the cancerous tumors of the outer universe. It was natural that the will of the universe would give him feedback. However, because his path of cultivation was different, it was his own path of cultivation. Perhaps the will of the universe could not provide him with any help in this regard. Everything could only depend on one's own efforts. Nianxin was his Taoist companion, so this reward fell on Nianxin. This was good. Giving Nianxin was actually the same as giving to himself. Involuntarily, Chunzong's heart gave birth to some expectations. Then, Nianxin, who had received the gift of the will of the universe, could have a better breakthrough. If the breakthrough succeeded, what would it be like after the breakthrough? The light on the starlight cocoon flickered incessantly, gradually dimming, and its power was completely restrained. Vaguely, Chunzong seemed to be able to feel that the power contained in the starlight cocoon was constantly increasing. It was a kind of change, a kind of qualitative change, a kind of metamorphosis. Stronger, full of stamina. Time passed, day by day, and even month by month. Chunzong cultivated while paying attention to the movements around him, guarding Nianxin. When half a year had passed, suddenly, there seemed to be an extremely resounding cry that resounded through the 9 heavens. Immediately after, strands of starlight shot out from the giant cocoon, intertwining and crisscrossing in the sky, as if they were threading a needle. It was also as if a great master of painting was using the void of the universe as a canvas to sketch out a world-shocking work of art. In an instant, the shadow of a phoenix appeared in the dark void of the universe. This phoenix was a little different from the golden phoenix. Its whole body was burning with white gold flames, and countless starlights surrounded it, merging with the white gold flames. In terms of shape, this white gold phoenix was more slender, and its posture was more graceful. It had a kind of misty, illusory color, so mysterious and magical. The white gold flames made Chunzong feel a trace of danger. Although it was difficult to feel the temperature, the danger was always there. It was as if the white gold flames contained an incomparable horror that could burn everything and completely turn everything into ashes. However, Chunzong had a kind of doubt. Could it be that Nianxin's bloodline was not abolished? It was just that the shadow of the phoenix was different from the one after the ancient phoenix bloodline was stimulated. Could it be that the bloodline had changed? For a moment, Chunzong did not know what was going on. He could only wait for Nianxin to come out. While waiting, the white gold phoenix shadow kept shrinking. It was originally 10,000 meters in size, but it kept shrinking to 9,000 meters, 8,000 meters, 7,000 meters. Although it shrank, it was more solid, and the aura it emitted was more tyrannical. When the white gold phoenix shrank to 1,000 meters in size, it almost condensed into a substance, and the aura it emitted increased sharply again. However, it was more than that, and it continued to shrink. The amazing aura continued to spread, and Chunzong could not isolate it. An extremely powerful aura immediately spread out from the distance. It swept out like a violent sea, sweeping away everything in its path in a mighty and invincible manner. Chunzong narrowed his eyes slightly and stared directly. He saw a huge figure approaching at an amazing speed. A giant beast, a cosmic beast. Moreover, it was a mature cosmic beast. The aura emitted by this cosmic beast was extremely tyrannical. It was at the level of the great saint realm, and it emitted an indescribable heat that seemed to be able to burn everything. The terrifying high temperature surged wantonly. In the blink of an eye, it could be seen that it was a giant beast in the shape of a snake dragon. Its body stretched more than 1,000,000 meters. It was so huge that it could easily crush stars. Its power was terrifying. Flaming dragon snake. Chunzong's expression changed slightly, and the information of the cosmic beast that he had read flashed in his mind. Suddenly, the corresponding name and information emerged. The flaming dragon snake was one of the cosmic beasts. It was born to control the fire of the dragon snake. This flame was so amazing that the temperature was so high that it could easily burn stars into nothingness. At the level of the Great Saint realm, the flaming dragon snake was very terrifying. Ordinary great saints were not willing to provoke it at all. After all, the body of the cosmic beast was so huge and tyrannical that it was extremely difficult to destroy it. It was difficult for divine ancestors to do so. In other words, it was very difficult for a great saint realm to kill the flaming dragon snake. It would be easier for a divine ancestor to do so. This flaming dragon snake seemed to be attracted by Yunyanxin's aura. Looking at its posture, it seemed that it intended to swallow Yunyanxin in one bite. Or rather, it would be good for it to swallow the platinum phoenix just now. How could Chunzong let the flaming dragon snake do so? His figure flashed, and he took a step forward, directly blocking the front of the flaming dragon snake. In comparison, Chunzong's body was like a speck of dust. There was an indescribable gap between him and the flaming dragon snake. Looking at the 1,000,000-meter-long flaming dragon snake charging towards him, Chunzong's eyes narrowed unconsciously. The momentum was too terrifying. It was more terrifying than a mountain crashing directly, especially when the flaming dragon snake possessed boundless power. Such a direct collision would directly blow up a little Saint Realm expert, and even a great Saint Realm expert would find it difficult to withstand. Inner universe expansion, stellar sword realm, sea calming domain. In an instant, Chunzong unleashed his full power. Unfortunately, it could only cover an area of 100,000 meters, while the flaming dragon snake was 1,000,000 meters long. It was impossible to completely cover it. However, Chunzong had a way. The power of the sea calming pearl was immediately mobilized by Chunzong. Endless seawater surged and surged endlessly. It continued to rise, and a giant of water was formed. He used all his strength to form a giant of water that was 10,000 meters tall. 10,000 meters was insignificant for the flaming dragon snake, but it was huge for Chunzong. When the sea calming pearl was not suppressing, it could form such a giant of water. Immediately, a giant sword of water that was 7,000 to 8,000 meters long was formed, exuding a terrifying sword power. Slash! Even in the face of the 1,000,000-meter-long flaming dragon snake, Chunzong had no intention of retreating or dodging. He directly faced it head-on. Although the giant of water was huge, its slash was not slow at all. It was extremely fast, and the power it contained was extremely shocking. It directly slashed a huge crack in the universe void. Chapter 31:24. The giant sword slashed out waves, one after another, representing each sword of the single-hearted sword technique. The 15 layers of waves carried terrifying power as they blasted toward the blazing dragon serpent, intending to shatter it. The sword light that was tens of thousands of meters long was extremely shocking. It could easily destroy mountains and even cause the ground to collapse. However, compared to the blazing dragon serpent that was 1,000,000 meters long, it was still far from enough. Facing the slashes of the 15 wave-like sword lights, the flaming dragon snake did not have the slightest intention of dodging. It continued to charge forward. For in Cosmic Beast, it did not even need to unleash any attack. Just a simple charge was enough to release an unparalleled, terrifying power that could easily turn stars into dust. The sword lights slashed out one after another, but they were all shattered. Not even a splash of water could be seen on the head of the blazing dragon serpent. This was because the surface of the blazing dragon serpent's body was terrifyingly hot. Once such a huge beast charged into the seawater in its path would evaporate in an instant. Eternal Star. Chunzong burst out with all his strength. No matter what, He had to stop the blazing dragon snake from getting closer. Otherwise, not only would it disturb Mien Xin, but it might even endanger her life. The 10,000-meter-tall water giant raised the 8,000-meter-long water sword. The sword's power was so strong that it could break through the universe. Such power was enough to surpass the Great Saint realm and reach the divine ancestor realm. In an instant, behind the water giant, a dark blue shadow of a star condensed and suddenly grew to 100,000 meters in size. 100,000 meters was not small for the blazing dragon snake. Compared to its body length, it was almost 1/10 of its size. The blazing dragon snake was a snake, and its head was the largest, but it was still less than 100,000 meters in length. As the deep and boundless blue star rotated, it quickly absorbed power from all directions. It was as if starlight was gathering from the void and entering it, causing the dark blue star to emit an ancient aura to continue to solidify. Its aura also became more and more terrifying. Around the 100,000-meter eternal star, the void of the universe collapsed. Each crack was tens of thousands of meters long. It was extremely terrifying. Such power made the blazing dragon snake's eyes tremble, and there was a change. Cosmic beasts were not brainless. On the contrary, cosmic beasts had a certain level of intelligence, but they never communicated with cultivators. Why? Because of his bloodline. The bloodline of the cosmic beasts was extremely shocking. In their eyes, there was no comparison at all. After all, the cosmic beasts were born with the power of the saint level. After they grew up, they could reach the great saint realm. Some of the stronger cosmic beasts could even reach the divine ancestor realm, or even the top divine ancestor realm. However, the upper limit of the blazing dragon serpent was the peak of the great saint stage. Ancient stars unleashed his full power, and a 100,000-meter-long deep blue star slashed out with the water giant's sword, crushing everything in its path as it headed straight for the blazing dragon snake. The strength of a great saint could not really threaten the fiery dragon serpent, but the power of a divine ancestor could. The fiery dragon serpent was frightened by the eruption of Chunzong's power. Without any hesitation, it opened its huge mouth and spat out a terrifying torrent of flames. This torrent was incomparably blazing, incinerating everything. It even carried pieces of meteorite fragments, and its might was terrifying to the extreme. Rumble. The torrent of flames collided directly with ancient stars. One was a blazing flame with high temperature. The other seemed to be formed by the condensation of endless sea water. They were different and restrained each other, and the aftermath of the collision was even more terrifying. However, although the fiery dragon serpent's attack was very strong, it was only at the great saint realm. The most powerful thing about the cosmic beasts was their bodies. Under the bombardment of ancient stars, the torrent of flames was suddenly broken apart, and ancient stars blasted towards the fiery dragon serpent at an astonishing speed. The fiery dragon serpent saw that its torrent of flames could not do anything to it, so it closed its mouth without hesitation. Its huge body suddenly trembled, and the edges of the huge scales on its body suddenly lit up with a dazzling red light, as if flames were flowing, and finally converged on its head, especially its forehead. On the forehead of the fiery dragon serpent, a flame quickly condensed, and the light shone in all directions, turning into a huge flame shield. With this, the fiery dragon serpent lowered its head slightly and burst out a terrible attack, blasting directly towards ancient stars. The most powerful thing about the cosmic beasts was their bodies. The strength of a great saint realm cosmic beast body was enough to withstand the frontal bombardment of many great saints. Only the power of a divine ancestor could threaten them. Collision. In an instant, ancient stars paused, and then there was a cracking sound, and cracks appeared and spread rapidly. In the next breath, it collapsed into countless fragments, and the fragments collapsed again completely. However, the fiery dragon serpent's collision was also stopped in an instant, and it could not move forward. Its huge body was even forced back by the impact, and the flame shield shattered in an instant. The scales on its forehead cracked and shattered, and a large amount of blood flowed out, and it collapsed directly. Under the impact of such a tyrannical and violent blow, the fiery dragon serpent could not withstand it. Its huge head shook, and it felt a little dizzy. Chunzong was secretly shocked. What a terrifying body. Ancient Star's sword directly had the power of a divine ancestor, but it only caused minor injuries. The body of the fiery dragon serpent was really terrifying. His strength was quickly recovering, and Chunzong was accumulating strength, ready to burst out again and slash out the most ferocious and tyrannical sword. But the fiery dragon serpent shook its head and quickly turned around and left. Seeing this scene, Chunzong was suddenly stunned, but he did not intend to pursue it because it was very difficult to kill the fiery dragon serpent if he chased after it, and it was even very difficult to do so unless his own strength broke through to the divine ancestor realm, and then there was hope with the help of the sea-suppressing orb. But even if he killed the fiery dragon serpent, what could he do? Would it bring him any benefits? It did not seem to bring him much benefit. Chunzong gave up chasing until the huge body of the fiery dragon serpent disappeared, and then he released the power of the sea-suppressing orb, and the water giant dissipated. Time continued to pass until 3 years had passed. The giant cocoon began to fade. No, it did not fade. Instead, it turned into strands of silk like a cocoon being peeled and integrated into the interior, where they were absorbed by the life inside. In the next moment, the 100-meter large, platinum-colored phoenix in the sky suddenly spread its wings, and an incomparably terrifying aura burst out. It directly rushed to the highest point of the sky, then turned around and suddenly rushed down. A rumbling sound burst out, and endless platinum-colored light blasted in all directions like thousands of swords, covering everything. Every platinum-colored sword light penetrated everything, and it was extremely sharp and terrifying. The temperature contained in it was completely restrained, but it could burn everything. A moment later, the platinum-colored light was restrained again, and it turned into a platinum-colored flame that burned endlessly. In the platinum-colored flame, a figure stood out of thin air. Yunyanxin. It was Yunyanxin, who had burned her ancient phoenix bloodline to sublimate to the extreme and received a gift from the will of the universe. Chunzong was sure that she had succeeded. Not only had she succeeded, but she had also broken through. Now, the aura that Yunyanxin exuded was so strong that it directly reached the level of a great sage. It was not the level of a beginner in the great sage realm, and it was extremely powerful. Although the platinum-colored flame did not emit any heat, Chunzong was afraid. This performance showed that the temperature of the flame was completely restrained, and it was even more terrifying under restraint. Gradually, the platinum-colored flame integrated into Yunyanxin's body, and Yunyanxin's body seemed to become real from illusory. The robe on her body was different from before. It was a very fitting and close-fitting sword robe. This sword robe was platinum-colored and had an indescribable sense of mystery. The patterns on it were crisscrossed, and each pattern seemed to be like a feather. There was a profound and mysterious fluctuation contained in it, but it did not leak out at all. Those patterns were like the patterns of phoenix feathers, but they also looked like the shape of flames. They were mysterious and deep, as if they were endless. In the middle of her eyebrows, there seemed to be a platinum-colored mark, which exuded an indescribable nobility and mystery. Yunyanxin opened her eyes and looked at Chunzong. It was a familiar and joyful look. It was not a familiarity that came from getting along with each other over the years, but a familiarity that came from a long time ago. With this look, Chunzong could be sure that Yunyanxin's memory had recovered. It was really recovered. Chunzong. Yunyanxin opened her mouth, and her voice was full of joy and excitement. My memory has recovered. My memory has finally recovered. She was overjoyed. At that moment, the void of the universe around her surged, and an indescribable change appeared vaguely under the influence of her joyful mood. Her cultivation had made a breakthrough, and so had her strength. She had advanced from the little saint realm to the great saint realm. Moreover, it was not an ordinary great saint realm. However, Yunyanxin did not care about this. nor did she feel happy because of this. What she was really happy about was that the seal on her memory had been lifted, and her memory had finally recovered. Her memory had recovered. This was a great joy, but Chinzong was also very curious. Was the bloodline gone, or had it transformed? The ancient phoenix bloodline is gone. Yunyanxin replied, but my own bloodline had been sublimated to the extreme before, but I almost failed. I accidentally received a mighty force that integrated into my bloodline. Under the extreme sublimation, I made a further breakthrough, and my bloodline transformed. Chinzong knew what the mighty force Yunyanxin was talking about was. It was the mighty force of the universe that the will of the universe had manifested as the eye of the heavenly way. This mighty force had a great effect on Yunyanxin. Not only did it allow her to make a successful breakthrough, but it also allowed her to make a further breakthrough in the extreme sublimation. It caused her bloodline to undergo earth-shaking changes, and she was completely free from the influence of the ancient phoenix bloodline. According to Yunyanxin's senses, this new bloodline also belonged to the phoenix bloodline. However, it had nothing to do with the ancient phoenix bloodline. It was a brand new bloodline, a terrifying bloodline that was much stronger than the ancient phoenix bloodline. This kind of phoenix bloodline was called the star-burning true phoenix. Chapter 31:25. The star-scorching true phoenix was an extremely powerful existence that had disappeared for many years. Who would have thought that Yunyanxin's bloodline would transform to this extent? As a result, not only did Yunyanxin break free from the suppression of the ancient phoenix bloodline, but he also recovered his memories. Moreover, his bloodline surpassed the ancient phoenix bloodline in all aspects, reaching a higher level. This meant that Yunyanxin's potential was higher and deeper, and his future path would be wider and longer. Joy, excitement, and then calmness returned. The two continued to move. However, during this period of time, a full 3 years, all the strongholds had been evacuated or moved away, and there was no way to find them. Helpless, Chinzong and Yunyanxin could only temporarily return to Taihao Mountain. On the way back, they would also look for a suitable place to establish a sect for the Tao of One Heart. It wasn't easy to find a suitable place. Establishing one's Tao as the foundation for all generations could not be taken lightly and had to be cautious. Because once a choice was made and a foundation was established, it would not be changed unless there was no other choice. For example, the Wanren sect, Yuanyuan Palace, and Trade Wind Tower on Wanyuan Island were forced to move away due to pressure from the Eagle God sect. However, after they found out that the Eagle God sect did not go to Wanyuan Island and observe for a few more years, they all moved back. Why? Because they had established their foundation on Wanyuan Island. Their roots were on Wanyuan Island, and this was a fact that could not be changed so easily. In the end, they returned to Wanyuan Island. They did not expect that after they returned and settled down, the Eagle God sect would directly descend, resulting in the tragedy that followed. If Chinzong had not returned, Trade Wind Tower and the others would have been destroyed sooner or later. After breaking through, Yunyanxin's flying speed was at least 10 times faster than before. He was not inferior to Chinzong by much. The two returned to Taihao Mountain at an astonishing speed. In just a few years, Taihao Mountain had not changed much. Master Exindao Emperor and the others were also peacefully cultivating on Taihao Mountain. With the resources provided by Chinzong, they had improved a lot in the past few years, and their strength had also improved significantly. Both Qing Ying and Tian Chu had broken through to the 4th realm. Of course, part of the reason for this was because their natural talents were pretty good, but it was also closely related to the cultivation environment and cultivation resources. Exindao Emperor and the others were naturally very happy with Chinzong's return. After all, they were not from Taihao Mountain. It was not a good thing for them to stay here for a long time. After all, this was not their territory. However, things are different now that Chinzong was back. He gave them a sense of confidence. After meeting his master and the others, Chinzong took Yunyanxin to meet the 3rd generation Taihao. You've understood? As soon as Taihao saw Yunyanxin, he was stunned. Then, he showed a touch of excitement and asked in a hopeful tone. After receiving Yunyanxin's affirmative answer, Taihao, the third generation of Taihao, had an indescribable feeling at that moment. He was extremely excited. For many years, he had been looking for a suitable candidate to cultivate. Unfortunately, he had not succeeded. Even Chunzong, who he thought the most highly, had failed. However, Chunzong's failure was different from the others. The others failed because they could not understand the spirit of Taihao or died prematurely. Chunzong's failure was because he was too outstanding. As a result, he walked his own path of cultivation. There was only one example of a new path that was completely different from the orthodox path of cultivation. Indeed, it was not possible to inherit the position of Taihao. After all, there were no hard and fast rules. However, the problem was that Chunzong was unwilling. Moreover, Chunzong's strength was much stronger than that of the third-generation Taihao. Now that Yunyanxin had understood the spirit of Taihao and had successfully broken through to the Great Saint Realm, he could pass on the position of Taihao and become the fourth-generation Taihao. This was worthy of celebration. For the third-generation Taihao, this was great news. How many years had it been? How many years had it been? Unable to wait any longer, the third-generation Taihao immediately announced that the Taihao succession ceremony would be held. This was a big deal, especially in the current situation where there were a lot of bad guys and the entire outer universe was in chaos. Taihao Mountain holding the Taihao succession ceremony was tantamount to announcing that Taihao Mountain had one more Great Saint Sword cultivator. In the outer universe, the Great Saint Realm was the pinnacle and the strongest existence. How astonishing would it be if the Great Saint Realm was added to the Great Saint Realm? It was enough to bring great excitement to the Holy Land Alliance, and it would also serve as a great deterrent to those evil forces. It was at such a juncture that a grand succession ceremony was needed instead of keeping a low profile. Why would they do this? Naturally, it was to inspire and intimidate the enemy. At the same time, they had also decided on some discussions and plans. With the succession ceremony as the pretext, if there were strong enemies from the Inferno Demon Gate, Infernal Order, and God Worship sect, they would take advantage of this opportunity to wipe them out in one fell swoop. At the very least, they had to inflict heavy losses on them and greatly weaken the strength of these three malignant tumors. Of course, the consequences of doing so were dangerous. If there were too many strong powerhouses attacking, it might have the opposite effect. However, this was indeed a very good opportunity. If they did not take advantage of it and take the risk, they did not know when they would be able to inflict further damage to the three malignant tumors. As for the danger, it was inevitable, but if they were prepared in advance, the danger would be minimized as much as possible. Invitation. For a time, Taihao Mountain immediately sent out invitations to the other surviving Holy Lands to attend the succession ceremony, inviting them to attend. Originally, there were more than a dozen Holy Lands in the outer universe, but after a few hundred years, 6 of them had been destroyed one after another. Now, only 7 Holy Lands were left. The ancient Yuan Holy Land, known as the number 1 Holy Land, had the longest history in the outer universe and had the most powerhouses. Although there was only one great saint, there were as many as 3 little saints. Previously, Taihao Mountain only had 1 eminent saint stage and 1 pristine saint stage powerhouse. Taihao Mountain's succession ceremony? In other words, Taihao Mountain will have 1 more great sword saint. Great Saint Gu Yuan, who was in the ancient Yuan Holy Land, was stunned when he heard the news. There were not many Holy Lands in the outer universe that had a great saint overseeing them, only 8. In other words, in the entire outer universe, there were no more than 10 great saints, including lone cultivators. So, why hadn't there been more than 10 great sage realm experts since ancient times? Of course, there were more. However, the outer universe was very interesting. Once one reached the Great Saint Realm, they would inherit the position of Holy Land Supreme, just like Taihao Mountain. The previous generation of Holy Land Supreme would leave to seek the mysteries of a universe, and even enter the core universe to pursue the further path of cultivation. Perhaps one could enter the inner universe, but was it necessary? The upper limit for entering the inner universe was the divine ancestor level, but entering the core universe could make one a god. Which was better? Of course, it was the latter. In the core universe, great saints were considered great beings. Under normal circumstances, they could protect themselves and pursue the path of practice better. It would be easier for them to break through to the level of divine ancestor compared to when they were in the inner universe. In that case, why would they need to go to the inner universe? It would be a waste of time. As a result, the number of great saints in the outer universe had always been maintained at a small number. Otherwise, if they had been passed down from generation to generation without leaving, then it was not impossible for the entire outer universe to accumulate dozens of great saints. Of course, it was not so easy to reach the great saint realm. It was also difficult for a little saint to break through to the great saint realm. The Great Skies sect was destroyed, and the great saint was naturally killed. For the Holy Lands Alliance, it was a great loss. Now, Taihao Mountain was going to hold the Taihao Mountain Succession Ceremony, which was equivalent to announcing that Taihao Mountain had one more great saint realm master. Moreover, it was a great sword saint with extremely strong offensive abilities. For the Holy Lands Alliance, this was great news. With one more great sword saint, the high-level combat power of the Holy Lands Alliance would obviously increase. At such a critical juncture, the third-generation Taihao would not leave, and the Holy Land Alliance would not lack a great sword saint. The ancient Yuan Sacred Land, Wanfeng's Sacred Land, 3,000 Winds Sacred Land, Unwavering Sacred Land, Startling Rainbow Sacred Land, and Firmament Sacred Land were all shocked. These 6 great holy lands all had great saint powerhouses overseeing them. Including Taihao Mountain, they were the only 7 great holy lands in the outer universe that had great saints overseeing them. Among them, the ancient Yuan Sacred Land was the strongest with 1 great saint realm master and 3 little saints, followed by Wanfeng's Sacred Land with 1 great saint realm master and 2 little saints. The other great holy lands had 1 great saint realm master and 1 little saint realm master. In terms of strength, they were about the same. However, Taihao Mountain was ranked 3rd because Taihao Mountain was the holy land of sword cultivators. The combat power of sword cultivators was often more outstanding among those of the same level. After receiving the invitation, the powerhouses of the 6 great holy lands were shocked and decided to participate. Of course, they did not dare to send great saints to participate. It was not that they did not want to give face, but they were worried that the Purgatory Demon Gate, Infernal Order, and others would take the opportunity to attack. There was a big difference between having a great saint realm master and not having one. A great saint realm master was enough to fight against several little saints. Although a great saint realm master could not personally participate in the inauguration ceremony, they could still send a little saint realm master. Although a little saint realm master was very strong, they were still incomparable to a great saint realm master. The gap was very obvious. Even if a strong enemy attacked, they could still hold on. With the strength of a great saint realm master and the activation of the Great Mountain Guarding Array, it would be difficult to break through in a short time unless the enemy's strength was too strong. If the Purgatory Demon Gate and Infernal Order had such strength, the Holy Lands in the outer universe would have been destroyed long ago. Moreover, after the Great Holy Lands formed an alliance, they had overcome some difficulties. Now, in the past few years, they had successfully built void gates in various holy lands. Once it was opened, reinforcements could arrive in a very short time. The inauguration ceremony would be held 3 months later. This was very normal. After all, to hold such a ceremony, it was necessary to send out a notice in advance so that people would know and allocate time to participate. Otherwise, they would only be notified when the ceremony was held. Sometimes, people would not have the time to participate. In addition, these 3 months were actually the time that Taihao Mountain used to make preparations. In order to prevent the Purgatory Demon Gate, Infernal Order, and God Worship sect from attacking, it would be better to resist their attacks and also better to kill them and cause more damage. The arrangements were carried out secretly. Chunzong and Yun Yinshin were constantly cultivating and improving. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.